Chapter 3388. Not long after, Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Chao Qingyu landed on the last reef island. The reef island, which had a radius of more than 200 miles, was also covered in purplish-brown reefs. There were almost no gems or ore veins. Similarly, the island was also covered in cracks and deep pits. There were also countless broken rocks and weapon remains scattered around. The three of them covered the entire reef island with their divine senses, but they could not find a single Sir God. The current situation was similar to that of the previous island. Yan Ku was filled with disappointment. His tone was somewhat resentful as he said, "That group of despicable thieves actually took advantage of the time when we were recuperating to steal the king-level divine object. Young master, let's hurry to the exit of the abyss. As long as we block the exit, we won't have to worry about not getting the divine object." Ji Tianqing frowned and said earnestly, "Until now, we don't even know what the divine object is. It's a little arbitrary to jump to conclusions. Moreover, blocking the exit of the abyss will definitely incur the wrath of the masses. I'm thinking about two other questions. Why are there dozens of Sir Gods here, but not a single one of them is here? Also, the reef island is very hard. Probably only the power of a godly king can destroy it. Even if those dozens of Sir Gods fought, they couldn't have damaged the reef island to this extent. There's a problem here." Yank was startled and scratched his head in confusion. Chao Qingyu suddenly thought of something and reminded, "Young master, didn't you say that the seal of the Golden Dragon Abyss only opens once every 100 years and that it only lasts for 2 months each time? It's been more than 50 days since the seal opened. In about 3 to 5 days, the seal of the Golden Dragon Abyss will close. I think those Sir Gods also calculated the time. Regardless of whether they got the divine object or not, they must have left as soon as possible. As for the destruction of the 2 reef islands, maybe a godly king appeared, stole the king-level divine object, and was besieged by many Sir Gods. Did the 2 sides engage in a fierce battle before the reef island was reduced to this state?" Ji Tianqing thought for a while and nodded slightly, "Yes, your deduction is quite reasonable. However, there are only 2 Sir Gods in the Golden Dragon domain. They are the Golden Dragon domain master and his wife. Besides them, which other Sir Gods would come here to steal the divine object? Furthermore, we were fighting in the direction we came from. If a divine king powerhouse passed by, it's impossible for us to not detect it, right?" This. Chao Qingyu was speechless. He didn't know how to explain. Right at this moment, Yan Ku suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His face was filled with surprise and joy. "Young master! I found it. It was still there. It's still there." Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu's thoughts were interrupted. They both turned to look at him with inquiring eyes. "What's still there? What did you find?" Yank pointed to the southwest of the island and said excitedly, "Just now, I used the Golden Cloud Earth technique to check. 20,000 feet underground, there is the aura of a king-level divine object in the rock stratum. It seems like there are 2 king-level divine stones. Young master, the king-grade divine artifact is still here. We didn't work for nothing." When Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu heard this, they were pleasantly surprised. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing's order, Yank used the Golden Cloud Earth technique. His entire body lit up with a dark yellow divine light. With a whoosh, he burrowed into the ground. The reefs were extremely hard. Even Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu had a hard time moving through them. Their speed could only reach about 300 feet per breath. Yank used the Golden Cloud Earth technique to move through the rock stratum like a fish in water. It was as if there were no obstacles. In every breath, he could dive 5,000 feet underground. His speed was astonishing. In just 4 short breaths, Yank had reached a depth of 20,000 feet and was close to the 2 divine stones. Since Yank had gone down, Ji Tianqing didn't have to go down himself. He and Chao Qingyu stayed on the island and used their divine sense to observe Yang's situation. 20,000 feet underground, in the purplish-brown rock stratum, there were indeed two divine stones that were as red as fire. Interestingly, the two divine stones were very big. They were as big as a house and had a diameter of about 10 meters. Moreover, the two divine stones were round and of the same size. They were about 300 feet apart from each other. Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu couldn't help but wonder what kind of divine stones they were. How could they be so big? The shape was very regular, and the size was also very uniform. This was too strange. At this moment, something unexpected happened. The sea of lava around the reef island, which was originally calm, suddenly began to surge violently. With a loud rumbling sound, the sea of lava surged with giant waves that were dozens of feet high. 7-colored divine fire gushed out of them. Swoosh! 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 The endless 7-colored divine fire gushed out of the sea of lava and covered the sky for hundreds of miles. In the blink of an eye, the dazzling 7-colored divine fire had sealed off the entire reef island and formed a huge shield. The reef island was sealed off by the 7-colored divine light shield. Gradually, it became impossible to see what was happening outside. As the divine fire gushed out of the sea of lava, the 7-colored divine light shield became thicker and thicker, and its defensive power doubled. The sudden change startled Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu. They frowned. Chao Qingyu reflexively drew her divine sword and scanned her surroundings warily. Ji Tianqing was concerned about Yang's situation. He quickly looked at the underground rock stratum. At the same time, the two divine stones in the rock stratum began to move. The entire reef island shook violently. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, and countless rocks flew out. Yang was also shocked. He didn't dare to dig any more divine stones. He quickly escaped from the underground as fast as he could. Swoosh! He moved even faster. In just 3 breaths, he was back in front of Ji Tianqing. Huff! 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 Young master! Those aren't divine stones, they're eyes. Yang gasped for breath and shouted. Eyes? Ji Tianqing's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood what Yang meant. You mean there's a divine king ferocious beast underground? The two divine stones we saw were actually its eyes. Yang nodded. Only now did Ji Tianqing come to a realization, and said, so that's how it is. No wonder the two divine stones were so big and the size was the same. Before he could finish his words, a deafening roar came from underground. The entire reef island shook violently. Countless cracks appeared on the ground, and lava and divine fire gushed out. No one could stand on the island anymore. Ji Tianqing and the other two could only fly into the sky. The 3 of them took out their divine weapons and looked down at the cracking reef island, waiting for the ferocious beast to appear. Although the world had changed, and the entire reef island was sealed off from the outside world, they were still fearless. They weren't in a hurry to escape. They also wanted to see what kind of ferocious beast was hiding under the reef island. The Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3389. Rumble. Ka-cha. Ka-cha. A series of loud noises could be heard, mixed with the sound of the reef island shattering. Under the gaze of Ji Tianqing and the other two, a huge ravine appeared in the middle of the reef island, and a 30-mile-wide crater appeared. Endless smoke and gravel rose into the air, and raging lava and the 7-colored divine fire splashed out from the crater. Dong! Dong! The first thing to emerge from the crater were 2 huge purple claws. The 2 claws looked like the claws of a dragon. Not only were they thick and sharp, but they were also covered with fine scales. Moreover, the 2 claws were huge, and each of them was equivalent to a palace. Could it be a divine dragon? Or a red earth dragon that lives in the lava of the earth's core. Even if this beast isn't a divine dragon, it might have the bloodline of a dragon. Its divine power is very violent. Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all guessing what the beast was. Then, a huge purple-brown head poked out of the deep pit. Swoosh! Seeing the seven-colored divine fire around the head, Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank were all stunned. It's not a divine dragon. What kind of monster is this? Why does its head look like a bull's? Indeed, that gigantic head had nothing to do with a divine dragon. At first glance, it did look more like a bull's head. There was a sharp bull horn on each side of its triangular head. The two pairs of huge red eyes were also surrounded by raging flames, and they were bloodthirsty and cruel. It stared at Ji Tianqing and the other two as it slowly crawled out of the crater. When it completely emerged from the crater and appeared in the sky above the reef island, Ji Tianqing and the other two finally saw what it looked like. They saw that this purple-brown beast with seven-colored divine fire around it was more than 20 miles long and thousands of feet tall. It had the head of a cow, the body of a tiger, and the tail of a scorpion with barbs. His entire body was covered in thick hair, but each strand was like a long spear, burning with fierce divine flames. With such a huge beast occupying the sky above the reef island, Ji Tianqing and the other two felt a huge sense of oppression. It was like a mountain, a volcano that was spewing flames and could erupt at any moment. Yank studied the beast and narrowed his eyes. He said in a low voice, "This beast is at the peak of the fourth divine king realm. It's even stronger than me. Moreover, this is his home ground. His combat power is definitely several times stronger than mine. It's probably going to be a little hard to deal with, right?" Chao Qingyu nodded in agreement and asked in a puzzled tone, "What kind of dire beast is this? Why haven't I seen it before?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "This is the Qi Fei, a ferocious beast from ancient times. It lives in the depths of the earth's core. Normally, it can only be seen in places where lava accumulates. However, this Qi Fei in front of us is different from the ordinary Qi Fei. Its lifespan should be more than 30,000 years. It's an ancient species that has lived since ancient times. Looking at its appearance and the attributes of its divine power, it must have fused with the seven-colored divine fire and lava, and its power has mutated. This beast is much more ferocious than the red earth dragon. It's really hard to deal with." After listening to his explanation, Yank and Chao Qingyu finally understood. Their expressions and eyes became even more serious. At this time, the Qi Fei's gaze swept across Ji Tianqing and the other two. After seeing their cultivation realms, it was obviously excited. It raised its head and laughed loudly, "Ha ha ha ha. God is so kind to me. I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, another divine king realm prey would fall into my trap. And this time, there are 3 of them." Probably because it was too excited, the Qi Fei shook its head, stretched out its front paws, and said excitedly, "Originally, the 2 months were almost up, and I was almost full. I was about to go into seclusion and hibernate. I didn't expect that in these last few days, you would take the initiative to deliver yourselves to me. This prince really wants to thank all of you for delivering such a delicious meal." As it spoke, the Qi Fei stretched out its long black tongue and licked its big mouth greedily. It seemed that in its eyes, Ji Tianqing, Yank, and Chao Qingyu were all delicious food. Yank felt a strong sense of contempt. He flew into a rage and was about to teach the Qi Fei a lesson. Ji Tianqing stretched out his hand to stop him. He stared at the Qi Fei and asked, "Qi Fei, from what you're saying, the appearance of the golden dragon abyss is related to you? Also, every 100 years, the divine flame seal of the abyss will open. Is that also your intention?" The Qi Fei's eyes narrowed. His gaze locked onto Ji Tianqing, and he sneered mockingly. "That's right. All of this is my plan." "You guessed right." "What?" Do you want to hear my plan and understand the inside story and the truth? Ji Tianqing had a rough idea, but he didn't know much about it. He remained silent, indicating his tacit agreement. The Qi Fei sneered, "Ha ha ha ha. You're just my food. Be a good boy and wait to be eaten by me. What right do you have to ask so many questions?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and smiled mockingly. "Anyway, you've already sealed off this reef island. We don't plan to leave this place. Moreover, the 2 months are almost up. Everyone has left the abyss. Now, we're probably the only ones left in this abyss. What are you afraid of? Why don't we chat? I'm sure you've been hiding here for a long time. You must be bored, right?" The Qi Fei frowned and thought for a moment. He couldn't help but nod. "I have to say, you're quite smart. What you say makes a lot of sense. Also, your divine soul and bloodline are very special. They have a taste that I desire very much. I'm merciful. I'll waste some time and let you know the reason for your death." Although Yang and Chao Qingyu's strength and realm were higher than Ji Tianqing's, it was an ancient beast. He could clearly sense that Ji Tianqing's bloodline and divine soul were more powerful and noble. Qi Fei was an ancient beast. If he swallowed Ji Tianqing's divine soul and bloodline, his potential would be stimulated. His talent and strength would be greatly improved. Therefore, he was willing to waste more time chatting with Ji Tianqing. As early as 10,000 years ago, this king had arrived at this magma sea and occupied this area. At first, there were countless fire spirits, fire demons, and all kinds of beasts. There was even a crimson fire earth dragon. However, this king had almost eaten all of them. Until 1,000 years ago, 2 divine kings fell from the sky and smashed through several thousand miles of rock stratum. They were on their last breaths and waiting for death. I was alarmed and left the lava sea. I passed through the rock stratum to check the situation. I didn't expect that many gods would be attracted by the huge commotion. They wanted to snatch the treasures of those 2 divine kings. However, in my eyes, they were all sumptuous food. Therefore, this king ate all of them, including the 2 god kings. From then on, I thought of an idea. I broke through the rock stratum and connected it to the lava sea, forming an abyss. Chapter 3390. Qi Fei's narration confirmed Ji Tianqing's conjecture. Without waiting for Qi Fei to finish, Ji Tianqing continued, "In the past, you hid in the underground magma sea and only knew how to devour the living beings in the magma sea. After you devoured the remains of the divine king and the numerous divine lords, you realized that the power they provided was richer and stronger. Therefore, you took the opportunity to create this golden dragon abyss, allowing countless divine lords to enter the underground magma sea. Because you know that the divine race has a strong curiosity and will definitely explore the situation at the bottom of the abyss. You also know that the divine race is greedy, so they scattered all kinds of divine stones, mineral veins, and gemstones in the depths of the earth's core to the various reef islands. A few lucky ones would obtain treasures, and the news would spread, attracting even more divine lords to explore the area. Therefore, countless divine lords became your food, providing nourishment for you to increase your strength. Am I right?" Qi Fei nodded and sneered mockingly, "That's right. Kid, you are smart, your guess is completely correct. But this is not all, this king also knows the principle of rare things being valuable. If this abyss is always open, it will lose its attraction. Usually, this king uses divine fire to seal the entrance to the abyss, and it will only open once every 100 years. In this way, every time the entrance to the abyss opens, it will be a grand event for the divine race, and at least 10,000 people will flock over. In addition, those people can come in at any time, and will endlessly disturb this king's cultivation. Every 100 years, this king will catch all of them in one fell swoop and eat heartily. Then, this king can sleep peacefully for 100 years, slowly digesting the power they provide. Those divine race clearly know that there is a slim chance of survival in the abyss, but they still come wave after wave, in an endless stream. Kid, don't you think that they are greedy beyond measure, and seek death in a righteous manner? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said indifferently, in this world, there are thousands of races, and all living beings want to reach the peak of the divine path. All divine spirits think that they are strong, and can dictate the life and death of others, and treat others as prey. But in reality, anyone can be a hunter, but they are also prey in the eyes of others. If those divine lords kill you, you will be the prey. Unfortunately, they weren't strong enough, so they became your food. Qi Fei thought about it seriously and couldn't help but nod. What you said makes sense. It seems to be the case. After a pause, its eyes suddenly lit up. It stared at Ji Tianqing with a playful look and asked, "What? You seem to be implying something. Do you really think that the three of you can kill this king and turn this king into your food?" What a joke. Ha ha ha. Qi Fei laughed contemptuously, his tone full of confidence and arrogance. All right, this king's story is over. You can all die in peace. As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Fei raised his mountain-like front claws and slammed them towards Ji Tianqing and the other two like Mount Tai. A formless, terrifying pressure enveloped the three of them, causing them to feel as if they were stuck in a quagmire, and their movements became sluggish. The three of them were about to be hit by Qi Fei's giant claws and be smashed into pieces on the spot. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing was fearless. He made a sword gesture with both hands and used a divine skill that he hadn't used for a long time. Sword rain. As he shouted coldly, tens of thousands of silver light spots appeared above everyone's heads, like stars falling from the sky. A total of more than 26,000 starry giant swords, with an indestructible and destructive momentum, poured down on the reef island. Yang and Chao Qingyu didn't dare to hesitate. They desperately burst out with their fastest speed and retreated to the sides. In the next moment, Qi Fei's two giant claws slammed down, and the two of them barely dodged. Ji Tianqing's figure was covered by the giant claws, and it seemed that he couldn't escape. But at the critical moment, his figure suddenly became transparent and merged with the surrounding heaven and earth. Kaboom! In the earth-shattering sound, Qi Fei's claws slammed hard on the ground. The ground was already fragmented, and two huge deep pits were formed on the spot. The entire reef island was torn apart, and endless gravel splashed out. Qi Fei was stunned. It raised a pair of front claws and stared gloomily at the ruins, searching for Ji Tianqing's trace. It couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing, who was supposed to be dead for sure, suddenly disappeared. Moreover, he disappeared right under its nose. It released its divine sense to search around, but it couldn't find where Ji Tianqing was hiding, and it couldn't see through Ji Tianqing's invisibility technique. This was too strange. In fact, Ji Tianqing didn't use the invisibility technique at all, but the infinite sky of chaos. He merged with heaven and earth within 100,000 miles. He was everywhere, but he didn't really exist. Unless Qi Fei could destroy heaven and earth within 100,000 miles, it would be impossible to kill Ji Tianqing. Otherwise, it couldn't do anything to Ji Tianqing. Just as Qi Fei was in a daze, 26,000 starry giant swords poured down and hit the seven-colored light shield with endless divine power. Bang, bang, bang. A series of deafening noises burst out, reverberating between heaven and earth for tens of thousands of miles. The light shield formed by Qi Fei's seven-colored divine fire was extremely solid and had very strong defensive power. However, the 20,000 starry giant swords were as dense as raindrops. After a series of fierce attacks, dense cracks appeared on the light shield. Then, the starry greatsword continued to bombard the light shield, blasting holes in it. With cracking sounds, the seven-colored light shield was soon fragmented, and countless divine light fragments were scattered. Without the seven-colored light shield, the 20,000 starry giant swords immediately sealed off the area within 1,000 miles and started to attack Qi Fei fiercely. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 10,000 starry giant swords split the sky and dazzled the divine light. Qi Fei was completely drowned by the sword light. Although its skin was rough and its flesh was thick, and its body was as sturdy as a king-level divine stone and divine armor. However, as more than 10,000 starry swords continued to bombard its body, deafening booms could be heard. Its body was trembling and it kept crying out in pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing used the power of heaven and earth within 100,000 miles to use all kinds of divine skills to attack Qi Fei. Heavenly Dragon Slash. Sky-breaking Sword. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. The sea of lava around the reef island kept bursting with powerful divine light shadows, attacking Qi Fei's vital parts. Qi Fei was a little flustered and could only take a defensive stance. But even so, it was only able to defend for 10 breaths before it was injured by Ji Tianqing. More than a dozen hideous wounds appeared on its mountain-like body, and blood kept flowing out. Qi Yan was both shocked and angry. He roared with murderous intent, "Reptile, get out here for this king. Come out if you have the guts. Don't hide. If you don't come out, I'll kill your companions first." Qi Fei saw through Ji Tianqing's tactic and guessed that he would hide and not come out, so it targeted Yang and Chao Qingyu. Ji Tianqing was not easy to deal with, so it would start with the two of them. Chapter 3391. Ji Tianqing was the main force against Qi Fei. He controlled more than 20,000 starry swords to form the heaven-destroying sword formation and used all his strength to suppress and kill Qi Fei. Yang and Chao Qingyu assisted from the side, constantly using their mystiques to attack Qi Fei's vital points. Unfortunately, Qi Fei's body was too special. It was almost made up of all kinds of god stones, and its defense was terrifyingly strong. Even with Yang and Chao Qingyu's experience and eyesight, they could not find Qi Fei's weakness and could only attack its vital points. However, the results were minimal. They used all their mystiques and ultimate skills, but they could only cause some minor injuries to Qi Fei. Now that Qi Fei was enraged, he stopped searching for Ji Tianqing's traces and turned his attention to the two of them. A pair of mountain-like front claws smashed down on Yang and Chao Qingyu. The broken reef island was smashed into countless pieces of rock and was drowned by the waves of lava. Qi Fei opened his mouth and spat out endless divine fire. Like a flood, the fire swept across 1,000 miles and filled the entire heaven-destroying sword formation. Yang and Chao Qingyu were under immense pressure. They could only use all their strength to resist Qi Fei's attacks. They kept retreating, not daring to face him head-on. The two of them were beaten to the point of retreating step by step. They were sent flying by Qi Fei one after another. They spat out blood as they fell into the sea of lava. Ji Tianqing immediately used all his strength and used his most powerful mystique. Sword of Destruction. He madly absorbed the power of the five elements world and released a huge divine sword that was hundreds of miles long. It slashed toward Qi Fei. Compared to the world slash, this mystique used double the power of the world. Its power was even more terrifying and could truly destroy the world. Qi Fei was chasing after Yang and Chao Qingyu. He only wanted to kill them as soon as possible. However, Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to find a flaw and launched a sneak attack from behind. When Qi Fei realized that something was wrong and wanted to dodge, it was already too late. Its body was too big, almost half the size of the reef island. It was too difficult to dodge in the blink of an eye. Therefore, it desperately shrank its body, and its body shrank 100 times in an instant. After all, the bigger the body, the bigger the target. Unfortunately, even if it shrank 100 times, it was still a mile long and hundreds of feet tall. The giant divine sword that could split heaven and earth slashed down and drowned out its figure. Kaboom! This loud sound was truly earth-shattering and earth-shattering. The magma sea within a radius of 50,000 miles was shaken by the huge waves, shaking violently. In the end, the Crimson Mantis was unable to dodge that sword strike and was actually hacked into the sea of magma. The giant sword cut open its hard back, creating a huge crack and cutting off one of its left front legs. Blood that was dark red like magma gushed out of the wound and poured into the sea of magma. The heart-wrenching pain made Chi Fei roar at the sky. Its voice was particularly miserable. It was so furious that it wanted nothing more than to tear Ji Tianqing into pieces and swallow him alive. However, Ji Tianqing had been in a state of disappearance. It could not find him at all, but it could clearly feel his aura everywhere. Chi Fei did not understand what was going on, but he did not want to waste time on it. He had to kill Yank and Chao Qingyu as quickly as possible with the most brutal means to ease the anger in his heart. Ah! Go to hell! Chi Fei roared crazily and released thousands of divine fire light pillars at Yank and Chao Qingyu. Boom! 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 More than 6,000 divine fire light pillars rained down on the lava sea within a radius of 1,000 miles like cannonballs. Although Chao Qingyu and Yank tried their best to dodge, the divine fire light pillars were too dense. In less than 2 breaths' time, Chao Qingyu was hit by a divine fire light pillar. Covered in flames, it was smashed into the surging lava sea. Yank had dodged the divine fire light pillars, but he was hit by Chi Fei's tail. The sharp barbs on the scarlet pheasant's tail tore the armor he wore into pieces, and a huge wound appeared on his waist and abdomen. Blood splattered. Yank let out a painful groan. After flying dozens of miles, he fell into the lava sea. Chi Fei followed up with another attack. He teleported and spat out scorching divine fire light pillar from his mouth. He wanted to burn Yank to ashes. It seemed that Chao Qingyu and Yank were in a perilous situation. Both of them were seriously injured. They couldn't resist Chi Fei's ferocious attacks at all. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to deactivate the infinite turbid sky and rush out of the lava sea to block Chi Fei's attack. Swoosh! With a flash of divine light, Ji Tianqing teleported to Yank's side. Just as the divine fire light pillar was about to engulf Yank, Ji Tianqing used the Great Protection technique and formed an oval shield. The shield of golden light with a radius of 300 feet wrapped around him and Yank. Boom! An earth-shaking explosion rang out as the shield was blasted away, smashing hundreds of miles away. However, the shield's defense was extremely strong. It didn't have any cracks or gaps. After flying hundreds of miles away, Ji Tianqing neutralized the force of the impact and stopped in midair with Yank. Yank was quite surprised. He heaved a long sigh of relief, as if he had just survived a disaster. He had thought that Chao Qingyu and Ji Tianqing were closer. When he and Chao Qingyu were in danger, Ji Tianqing would definitely save Chao Qingyu. He didn't expect, he was both surprised and touched. At this moment, Ji Tianqing shouted coldly, "Why are you in a daze? Hurry up and heal your wounds." Oh, oh. Yank came to his senses and hurriedly retreated further away to heal his wounds. Chi Fei was stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed menacingly. "Ha ha ha. You bastard, are you finally willing to come out? Die." From the beginning, Chi Fei's main target had been Ji Tianqing. Not only was Ji Tianqing the most despicable, but also because his soul and bloodline were more attractive to Chi Fei. Chasing after Chao Qingyu and Yank was also to force Ji Tianqing to show himself. Now that Ji Tianqing had appeared, he had achieved his goal. Naturally, he attacked even more ferociously. Swoosh! Swoosh, swoosh! Chi Fei waved his claws and fangs in a frenzy. He waved his barbed tail and attacked Ji Tianqing. Endless divine fire also spewed out from his bloody mouth. It poured down like a torrential flood towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing used his left hand to conjure a spell to control the heaven-destroying sword formation to kill Qi Fei. His right hand held the sword of burial of heaven. He used all kinds of abhijna and ultimate skills to fight Qi Fei. All kinds of abhijna and secret spells clashed violently between heaven and earth. There was a huge explosion that shook the 9 heavens. Boom! Boom, boom, boom. Within a short period of time, Ji Tianqing and Qi Fei had exchanged more than 300 blows and chased each other around the heaven-destroying sword formation. The destructive shockwaves overturned the sea of lava within 1,000 miles. Chao Qingyu and Yank could only retreat outside the heaven-destroying sword formation. After treating their wounds, they quickly returned to the heaven-destroying sword formation to continue the battle. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3392. In this way, the situation within the sword formation became Ji Tianqing and the other 2 joining forces to besiege the Qi Yan. Ji Tianqing was the main force. He was the most ferocious and gave Qi Fei the most pressure. Yank and Chao Qingyu assisted Qi Fei by attacking Qi Fei from both sides. Bam bam bam. Rumble. Both parties moved around in the sword formation and unleashed all kinds of secret skills. They clashed fiercely and made a series of loud noises. In the beginning, Qi Fei was able to resist the attacks of the 3 with its strong defense and vigorous divine power. However, it was severely injured and did not have the chance to treat its injuries. Its divine blood kept flowing out and its power was declining rapidly. It could absorb the power of the sea of lava to replenish its divine power. However, Ji Tianqing set up the heaven punishment sword formation and sealed off the area within a 1,000-mile radius, isolating the sword formation from the outside. Qi Fei absorbed all the power of the sea of lava in the sword formation and could not replenish its divine power. As a result, its power was being depleted rapidly and it could not replenish its divine power. Its combat power was declining rapidly. It was in a passive situation. It was defending more than attacking and its injuries were getting worse. If nothing changed and things continued like this, it could already foresee the outcome. Therefore, it returned to its original size and used its mountain-like body to crash into the heaven punishment sword formation. It ignored the attacks of the giant swords in the sky and exploded with the most ferocious power. It crashed into the light wall of the sword formation again and again. Bam! Bam bam! It wanted to break through the seal of the heaven punishment sword formation and escape from the sword formation. Once it returned to the vast sea of lava, it could quickly replenish its power and regain its powerful combat power. No matter how serious its injuries were, even if they were fatal, it could quickly recover. Moreover, if it could not defeat Ji Tianqing and the other 2, it could dive into the sea of lava to escape. No one was more familiar with the sea of lava than it was. It was its territory and it was invincible. Ji Tianqing knew what Qi Fei was thinking. He slowed down his attacks and focused on increasing the power of the heaven punishment sword formation. Originally, there were 10,000 starry giant swords forming the heaven punishment sword formation, forming a sword light wall. The other 16,000 plus stellar swords formed a sword net and hurricane that covered the sky and earth, madly strangling the crimson pheasant. However, Ji Tianqing made a change. He increased the number of giant swords to the sword formation to 20,000. The remaining 6,000 or so swords formed the 6 Daos sword formation tornadoes, continuously bombarding the scarlet pheasant. The defense of the heaven-destroying sword formation had been strengthened, and the scarlet pheasant's repeated attacks had no effect. Seizing this opportunity, Ji Tianqing, Yan Ku, and Chao Qingyu attacked the scarlet pheasant with all their might, firmly restraining it. Scarlet Pheasant had to defend against the attacks of the 3 and the 6,000 giant swords while casting spells to bombard the sword light barrier. Under such circumstances, it continued to attack for 15 minutes, but it was still unable to break through the heaven-destroying sword formation. It was helpless and resentful. It could only give up the idea of breaking the formation and focus on attacking Ji Tianqing and the other two. The crisis was resolved. Ji Tianqing and the other two then engaged in a fierce battle with Qi Yan, charging left and right in the sword formation. Time passed quickly. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. This was the longest battle Ji Tianqing and the others had ever fought since they entered the Golden Dragon Abyss. At the same time, their enemy was also the strongest and most difficult to deal with. Qi Fei was only at the peak of the fourth Heaven Divine King realm and was not as strong as the Golden Dragon Region Master. However, its combat power was much stronger than the Golden Dragon Region Master. This was the difference between an ordinary divine tribe and an ancient beast. Of course, Qi Fei was the overlord of the abyss. The Sea of Lava was its territory. This was also the main reason. 12 hours had passed and the battle was still not over. At this moment, not only was the strength of the Scarlet Pheasant greatly weakened, its combat strength had sharply decreased, and its entire body was riddled with scars. Even Ji Tianqing, Yank, and Chao Qingyu were weak and had many new wounds on their bodies. Their hair was disheveled, and their robes were stained with blood. Yank was the most severely injured, followed by Chao Qingyu. Ji Tianqing was the least injured. However, Qi Fei was the most severely injured and in the most dangerous situation. It only had about 50% of its strength left. It would be exhausted in another 4 to 6 hours. During this time, it tried to break through the Heaven Punishment Sword formation 3 times. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing successfully neutralized it each time. It could not break free from the sword formation. After all, it was only a beast. It only had various divine skills and killing moves. It only had a superficial understanding of the divine tribe's techniques such as formations and weapon refinement. It had no idea how to break through the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. It could only rely on brute force. It had a premonition that if it did not escape from the Heaven Punishment Sword formation, it would be buried here today. Thus, it made a ruthless decision and used its trump card. Red Dragon Drill. Qi Fei burned its own divine blood and did not hesitate to consume 1,000 years' worth of power. It unleashed all its potential and doubled its combat power. Its entire body ignited with bloody flames that soared into the sky. Its gigantic body also began to swell, emitting a violent aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. Swoosh! 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 Its body spun rapidly. It was like a flaming spear that was hundreds of miles long. It pointed at a certain spot on the sword formation's light wall and blasted it at its fastest speed. Obviously, Qi Fei wanted to use its divine body as a spear and the horn on its head as the blade. It wanted to break through the sword formation with its strongest force. Its charge was incomparably violent and unstoppable. Even Ji Tianqing did not dare to block it, let alone Yank and Chao Qingyu. Damn it! We can't let it escape from the sword formation. Once it escapes into the Sea of Lava, we won't be able to trap it or kill it. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. His eyes flashed with deep worry. Yank and Chao Qingyu were also anxious, but there was nothing they could do. Qi Fei pierced through the sky like a flaming spear and rushed toward the sword formation's light wall. In a moment of desperation, Ji Tianqing could only draw on the power of the 5 elements world again and use his trump card. Celestial Dragon Overlord Body. Sword of Destruction. He shouted angrily. His body instantly expanded to a height of 10,000 feet and turned into a giant golden god. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and released endless power of the world. He slashed out a huge divine sword that was hundreds of miles long. This huge sword that could split heaven and earth slashed toward Qi Fei. It released a terrifying power that could destroy everything. However, Qi Fei's speed was extremely fast. It changed direction in an instant and deviated from its original trajectory. The sword of destruction did not hit Qi Fei directly. It only hit the back of the flaming spear, which was the back of Qi Fei's waist. Kaboom! In an earth-shattering sound, the sword of destruction suddenly collapsed. Hundreds of millions of sword-light fragments splashed out. The flaming spear was also cut in half. Qi Fei's 2 hind legs and tail were cut off by the huge sword on the spot. Although it let out a heart-wrenching cry, it still crashed into the sword formation's light wall without slowing down. It had made up its mind. Even if it was severely injured, it had to break through the sword formation's blockade to escape. Chapter 3393. Kaboom! With a deafening boom, the scarlet pheasant crashed into the light wall of the heaven-destroying sword formation. Even though it was severely injured and only had half of its body left, its hind legs and tail were gone. But its speed was extremely fast and its speed was extremely fast. Its impact was extremely powerful. As expected, it blasted a huge hole in the starry light wall of the heaven-destroying sword formation. Countless fragments of sword radiance burst out. Swoosh! When the divine light exploded, Qi Fei passed through the fragments of sword radiance and escaped from the heaven-destroying sword formation. Ha ha ha! I'm finally free. Damned bastard, do you think you can trap this king? You're too naive. Qi Fei floated above the lava sea and turned to look at the huge hole in the heaven-destroying sword formation. It laughed proudly. The feeling of escaping from death made it very proud and relieved. Its mentality was also very relaxed. In its mind, Ji Tianqing's heaven-destroying sword formation had been broken and most of his divine power had been used up. It should not have any combat power left. When it returned to the magma sea, this vast and boundless magma sea was its most solid backing. If there was any danger, it could escape into the lava sea immediately and be safe. However, it never expected that Ji Tianqing would also chase it out immediately. Moreover, Ji Tianqing took advantage of its inattention to teleport in front of it and use a new divine power. Blade of Spacetime. He, who was 100 feet tall, held the 800 feet long barrier of heaven tightly with both hands and used all his strength to slash out a ray of blazing white sword radiance. The huge white sword, which was thousands of feet long, released an invisible strong divine power and instantly enveloped Qi Fei. Qi Fei could clearly feel that the space within 100 miles around it had solidified. It was like a mosquito in an ice cube. Its body was stiff and it could not move at all. It could not even dodge, let alone escape into the lava sea. What was more terrifying was that it could even feel that the flow of time around it had become abnormally slow. It was at least 5 times slower than the normal flow of time. In other words, whether it was casting a spell to counterattack or trying to dodge, its speed would be 5 times slower than normal. At this moment, Qi Fei's laughter stopped abruptly, and his eyes were filled with fear and despair. Time. Space. You actually used spacetime energy? Red Pheasant showed an incredulous look and roared in horror. To divine king powerhouses, grasping spatial power and laws was not something rare. 95% of the godly monarchs had grasped the spatial laws. They could teleport and traverse the void at will. However, time was one of the most mysterious and powerful forces in the world. 99% of god-kings were unable to control the power of time. This had nothing to do with strength or realm. It was only related to talent, comprehension, and luck. Even if it was a peak divine king, without the corresponding lucky chance, it was also impossible to grasp the power of time. But Ji Tianqing did it. However, this was only a superficial use of the power of time, and it only slowed down the flow of time. However, this still made Qi Fei extremely shocked, and a deep sense of despair grew in his heart. It knew that it had been careless this time. It was probably doomed. At the same time of shock and despair, it was filled with regret. If time could be reversed, the moment it escaped the heaven extermination sword formation, it would not have stopped and directly dived into the sea of lava. If that was the case, how could Ji Tianqing have the chance to use the power of time? Unfortunately, it was too late to say anything now. Boom! Crack! In the next instant, the space-time blade that was 10,000 feet long slashed fiercely onto Qi Fei, erupting with an earth-shattering bang. Its already incomplete body was split into two halves by the space-time blade on the spot, splattering blood all over the sky. What was even more terrifying was that the power of the space-time blade was completely released, and it was extremely violent and dazzling its body. Crack! 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 A series of crisp shattering sounds rang out. The two halves of Qi Fei's body actually collapsed into hundreds of millions of pieces and ignited with a blazing divine fire. Even its divine persona was struck by the space-time blade and collapsed on the spot. At this time, the power of the space-time blade was exhausted and gradually dissipated. Looking at the fragments and flowing fire scattered all over the sky, Ji Tianqing slowly put away the burial of heaven's sword and murmured to himself, I've been comprehending and cultivating the heaven extermination divine art for so long, and with the help of the power of distorting time and space, I was able to comprehend this space-time blade, and it became one of the top divine abilities I created. Originally, this divine ability was not mature and stable enough, and I wanted to improve it a little more before using it. I didn't expect that the first time I used it would be in such a sloppy situation. Fortunately, the power of this divine ability is extraordinary, and it didn't let me down. Indeed. In this life, whether it was talent, aptitude, strength, or foundation, he was much stronger than in his previous life. Of the thousands of divine abilities that he had mastered in his previous life, he only recultivated the most exquisite and powerful ones. Apart from that, he had to create even more powerful divine abilities and secret arts through his own comprehension. This space-time blade was the result of his nearly 10 years of research. Now that he was using it for the first time, the results were remarkable. Just as Ji Tianqing was distracted, Chao Qingyu and Yang's exclamations suddenly came from behind him. Young master, what are you waiting for? Quickly refine it. Oh my God! It turns out that Qi Fei is the greatest treasure, and its body is the most precious resource and divine item. Ji Tianqing was awakened on the spot and hurriedly looked up at the sky. He saw that after Qi Fei's body collapsed, the billions of fragments, after being burned, released an endless torrent of divine power. The surging seven-colored divine fire, mixed with billions of colorful gems, as well as all kinds of divine gold and crystals, poured down like a flood. After Qi Fei died, its divine body actually disintegrated. It returned to its most primitive state, scattering endless divine power, divine fire, and gold, wanting to return to the magma sea. After all, it was born in the magma sea. It took tens of thousands of years to absorb endless power and gold to grow into its current state. Now that it was dead, it naturally returned to its original state. Ji Tianqing immediately understood. Without hesitation, he hurriedly stretched out his palms and released a surging devouring power. Swoosh! Two huge pitch-black vortexes formed, madly devouring the divine power, divine fire, and gold. Moreover, Ji Tianqing also released his divine consciousness, found Qi Fei's dozens of divine spark fragments, and put them into the interspatial ring. Next, he focused on devouring the flowing flames and golden stones that filled the sky, rapidly increasing his strength. Qi Fei's body was too big, and there were too many divine fire and gold scattered after it disintegrated. Ji Tianqing could not devour it all by himself, and he was not fast enough. Therefore, Chao Qingyu and Yang rushed up and used their ultimate skills to devour Qi Fei's power. Although their devouring speed could not compare to Ji Tianqing's, they quickly replenished their energy. However, they were able to quickly replenish their energy and increase their own strength, which also lessened Ji Tianqing's burden. Chapter 3394. Qi Fei's divine body was too huge. For tens of thousands of years, it had devoured a terrifying amount of divine power, divine fire, and metal stones. As a result, it took 3 days and 3 nights for the scattered power and metal stones to dissipate. Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang also continued to devour divine fire and metal stones for 3 days and 3 nights without stopping. What was gratifying was that the divine fire and metal stones that filled the sky were the purest power and divine items. The 3 of them could directly devour and refine them without worrying about impure power. But what was distressing was that Chao Qingyu and Yang had devoured too much power and divine items. Not only had their injuries mostly healed, but their divine power had also been replenished. Their divine bodies were also bloated like 2 bloated balls. Fortunately, it was all over. If they had continued to devour for half a day, they would probably have exploded. Moreover, they urgently needed to cultivate in seclusion. They needed at least half a year to refine all the power they had devoured and convert it into their own power. Ji Tianqing's situation was slightly better. Although he had devoured 80% of the power after Qi Fei's disintegration. But he had used the devouring theurgy to store the infinite divine power and metal stones in the heaven-mending pearl. In this way, his body size did not change much, and it did not affect him much. The only visible change was that his injuries had mostly healed, and his power had returned to its peak. Once Qi Fei collapses, we will be full. Ji Tianqing looked at Yang and Chao Qingyu. Seeing that they were so full that they could not even speak, he could not help but want to laugh. Forget it. Looking at how greedy you are, you probably won't be able to digest it in a few months. Come with me. With that, he brought Yang and Chao Qingyu back to the heaven-destroying sword formation. Previously, Qi Fei had blasted a huge hole in the sword formation, but it had already repaired itself. Even if Ji Tianqing did not care, the sword formation would automatically operate and cover a radius of 1,000 miles. Ji Tianqing summoned the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda and made it float in the air. Then, he led Chao Qingyu and Yang into the distorted spacetime of the divine pagoda. Shwa! The 3 of them flew through the colorful distorted spacetime toward the blood flame sacred tree in the middle. Yang had been in seclusion here for more than 10 years to recuperate, so he was no stranger to the distorted spacetime. However, this was the first time Chao Qingyu had entered a distorted spacetime after following Ji Tianqing. He looked around curiously. When he sensed the changes in spacetime, he was surprised and shocked. At the same time, he also guessed that this was the place where Ji Tianqing and his family usually cultivated in seclusion. In other words, this was Ji Tianqing's most confidential cave residence and lair. Only his closest and most trusted people had the right to come here. Thinking of this, Chao Qingyu felt a little excited. It seems that after so many dangers and tribulations, young Master Tianqing already trusts me. That's great. From this moment on, the couple and Ji Tianqing had let down their guard and truly gained his trust. To him, this was even more exciting than obtaining a king-level theurgy. Soon, the 3 of them flew to the bottom of the blood flame sacred tree. Ji Tianqing looked at the sacred tree and couldn't help but smile. As I expected, Qi Fei's blood qi and soul essence were all devoured by the blood flame sacred tree after his death. The nourishment the sacred tree received this time is several times more than when the domain mistress died. I guess the sacred tree can grow a few hundred feet taller after digesting the blood qi and soul essence. These thoughts flashed through his mind. He turned to Yang and Chao Qingyu and said, "Find a place to cultivate in seclusion under the sacred tree. Don't disturb the others. When I'm done, I'll wake you up." Yang nodded. He found a place to sit down and began to cultivate. Chao Qingyu was unfamiliar with this place. He circled the sacred tree and looked at Ji Ku, Yun Yao, and the white dragon. When he saw the black dragon and Qian Yu, he was startled. His eyes were filled with shock. Oh my God! Is that a divine dragon? A black dragon? And that fox? Isn't that a heavenly fox? Why is it here on the boundless heaven continent? Young Master Tianqing has a divine dragon and a heavenly fox as his pets and has never shown them to others. How low-key. Chao Qingyu's heart was pounding with excitement. He was even more in awe of Ji Tianqing's identity and background. Suddenly, he heard Ji Tianqing's voice behind him. Qingyu, you've been stuck at the third level of the Divine King realm for a few thousand years, right? Chao Qingyu was startled. He quickly turned to Ji Tianqing and nodded. Yes, young master. It's been 3,675 years. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. He took out 9 purple god fruits and placed them in front of Chao Qingyu. You've already accumulated enough strength and foundation. But you still lack an opportunity. You need a huge amount of divine energy to help you break through to the 4th level. This time, you've absorbed Qi phase energy. This is the perfect opportunity. But it's still not enough. After you've absorbed Qi phase energy, take these 9 god fruits and continue to cultivate. There's a 70 to 80% chance that you'll break through to the middle level of the Divine King realm. Hearing these words, Chao Qingyu was stunned on the spot. He stared at the 9 purple god fruits and said excitedly, Young master. What are you doing? I don't deserve such a reward. Take back these precious things. Qingyu doesn't dare to accept them. Ji Tianqing smiled and pointed at the bloody flame sacred tree. These god fruits are precious. It's not an exaggeration to say that they're priceless. But only my family and friends deserve to enjoy them. And I'll make sure that you're full. Chao Qingyu was shocked again. He looked up at the crown of the bloody flame sacred tree and realized that there were at least 1,000 purple god fruits among the dense branches and leaves. However, the 9 god fruits that Ji Tianqing gave him were bigger. They were obviously ripe. On the other hand, many of the god fruits on the sacred tree were smaller and would take many years to ripen. Chao Qingyu hesitated for a moment before he reached out to take the 9 god fruits. He hugged the god fruits and bent down with difficulty. He bowed to Ji Tianqing and said sincerely, Thank you, young master, for your trust and gift. I'll never forget it. Cultivate well and become a middle-level divine king soon. Ji Tianqing smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Then, he turned and left. After a full 15 minutes, Chao Qingyu finally calmed down. He chose a place to sit down and cultivate in seclusion. Breaking through to the middle level of the Divine King realm was one of his greatest wishes. In the past, he didn't dare to think about it and didn't have the corresponding opportunity. But now, Ji Tianqing had created an excellent opportunity for him. Moreover, the success rate was as high as 70%. This increased his confidence and made his blood boil. He was full of anticipation. He swore in his heart that he must break through to the 4th level of the Divine King realm and become a middle-level Divine King. No matter what, he couldn't let down Ji Tianqing's trust and help. Chapter 3395. The time in the distorted spacetime was 50 times faster than the outside world. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Yang and Chao Qingyu had finished their seclusion. They had refined Qi phase energy and the metal and stone. Although their strength had obviously increased by a large margin, and their battle prowess had also increased by 2 times. However, their realms hadn't broken through yet. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was still in seclusion, Yang continued to cultivate to strengthen his foundation of the divine path. Chao Qingyu, on the other hand, was in high spirits. The situation was just as Ji Tianqing had said. After he had refined Qi phase energy, his realm had reached the limit of the 3rd heaven of the King God realm. He had reached the critical point. If he didn't have the opportunity to replenish his energy, he would be stuck at the critical point for a long time. But now, he took out the 9 divine fruits that Ji Tianqing had given him and ate them one by one. Although the divine fruits tasted sour, they melted in his stomach and released a great amount of divine energy. Incomparably pure blood Qi and divine soul energy surged in his body, helping him break through the shackles of the middle god-king realm. He could clearly feel that the barrier between the third and fourth heaven of the king-god realm was loosening. Breaking through to the middle god-king realm was just around the corner. On the other side, Ji Tianqing was still sitting cross-legged under the blood-flame sacred tree. He closed his eyes and cultivated. 5-colored divine flames surrounded his body. In the past half a year, he had refined Qi phase energy. His strength had reached the limit of the first heaven of the king-god realm. Unfortunately, he still needed a huge amount of divine energy to break through to the second heaven of the king-god realm. Therefore, he took out Qi phase godhead fragment. Qi phase body was huge. His godhead was also extraordinarily huge. It was as big as a water tank. Although his godhead had been broken into 18 pieces. However, each piece of the godhead was as big as a wash basin. This is definitely the largest piece of godhood I've ever refined in my life. Ji Tianqing weighed the wash basin-sized godhead fragment in his hand, and a playful smile appeared on his face. Soon, he went into seclusion to refine Qi phase godhead. Not only was he going to refine the boundless energy within the godhead, but he was also going to refine the divine Tao laws within it. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, another year had passed. Ji Tianqing had refined 12 of Qi phase 18 godhead fragments. At this moment, he finally broke through the bottleneck of the first level of the Divine King realm and successfully reached the second level of the Divine King realm. After raising his cultivation level, Ji Tianqing's body lit up with a divine light that soared into the sky, emitting a world-shaking divine power fluctuation. His divine body continued to strengthen, becoming several times stronger than before. His strength had also increased by leaps and bounds, increasing by more than 8 times. However, he didn't end his seclusion. He continued to focus on his cultivation and continued to refine the remaining godhead fragments. Not only did he devour the energy in the quintessence fragments to strengthen his foundation in the second heaven of the Divine King realm, but he also increased his strength. He even refined divine Tao laws after divine Tao laws to further strengthen his strength. He estimated that he would need another half a year to refine all 6 godhead fragments and end his seclusion. 4 months ago, Chao Qingyu had already broken through the shackles of the third heaven of the Divine King realm and successfully reached the fourth heaven of the Divine King realm, becoming a medium Divine King. At the same time, Ji Tianqing and the others had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for 1.5 years. However, only 11 days had passed in the outside world. 8 days ago was the closing date of the Golden Dragon Abyss. According to the usual practice, the divine flame light shield that sealed the entrance of the abyss would all be repaired. Therefore, the various forces that had entered the abyss to search for treasures, including thousands of Sir God experts, had already left the abyss. After flying out of the abyss, the Sir God experts dispersed and returned to their camps. However, the dozens of forces wouldn't leave immediately. The injured Sir God experts urgently needed treatment, and the forces that had disputes in the abyss would settle it on the surface. Within 3 days, more than 20 forces left one after another. The remaining 40 forces also prepared to leave after the abyss closed. However, on the morning of the 4th day, the Sir God experts discovered something strange. The entrance of the abyss, which was supposed to be closed, didn't move at all. The light shield formed by the 7-colored divine flame still sealed the entrance of the abyss. However, the many cracks and holes on the light shield still existed and hadn't healed. This abnormal reaction shocked and puzzled the 40 forces. They all guessed what was going on. Some people thought that they had calculated the time wrongly and that the entrance of the abyss would only close after a few more days. Some people regretted it so much that they said they had found a mine, but unfortunately, they didn't have time to mine it and could only leave before the abyss closed. If they had known that the entrance of the abyss would close later, they would have taken the risk to mine the mine. Some people even boldly guessed that the energy in the abyss had changed and the entrance wouldn't close in the future. All in all, the dozens of forces had different opinions and no one knew the real answer. However, they were even more unwilling to leave. Many Sir God experts were eager to return to the abyss to continue their exploration. However, those Sir God experts were also afraid that the entrance would close soon after they entered the abyss. If that happened, they would definitely die. Everyone was hesitating, weighing the pros and cons, but no one dared to take the lead to return to the abyss. Until the night of the 11th day. A group of uninvited guests suddenly arrived at the entrance of the abyss and broke the deadlock. Swoosh! 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 A mass of five-colored divine light that blotted out the sky sped over from the night sky. When this mass of divine light stopped at the entrance of the abyss, the dozens of forces saw it clearly. Those were over 100 Sir God experts. Their attire was different and they seemed to come from different empires. However, their strength was all 7th level Sir God and above. They were all high-ranking Sir Gods. In addition, the leaders of this Sir God team were 3 experts with super powerful auras. The leader was 100 feet tall and was burly like a tower. He had a head of golden hair and wore dark yellow ancient bronze armor. There were 6 5-colored wings on his back. He had a blood-colored divine eye on his forehead and 8 ancient bronze divine spears hung on his waist. His entire body emitted a peerless divine might that could suppress heaven and earth. Standing behind him were also 2 experts with unfathomable auras. One was a handsome and valiant youth wearing a white robe. The other was wearing silver divine armor and had a rather valiant appearance. When had the Sir Gods of the dozens of forces seen such a grand lineup before? Although they did not know what realm the strength of those 3 experts had reached. However, they were clear in their hearts that to be able to command close to 100 high-ranking Sir Gods, they were definitely top-notch experts. They were very likely divine kings. As expected. If Ji Tianqing was here, he would be able to recognize those 2 handsome and valiant youths. They were precisely the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Cloud Region Lord, Jing Feihong. The 2 region lords brought close to 100 high-ranking Sir Gods to the entrance of the Golden Dragon Abyss. Naturally, it was to seek revenge on Ji Tianqing. However, the 2 of them were not the leaders of the team. That 100 feet tall Sir God expert with 6 wings and blood-colored eyes was the leader. Because his identity was the Azura God Emperor's lackey, the most loyal spy, Divine Envoy Haotian. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3396. The Azura God Emperor was high and mighty, overlooking and controlling the entire boundless heaven continent. He had not appeared since 1,000 years ago, when he was crowned emperor and took control of the boundless heaven continent. The various affairs of the close to 100 regions on the continent were handled by the various region lords. However, the Azura God Emperor had 49 heavenly god envoys who patrolled the continent on his behalf. While supervising the close to 100 region lords, they also had to maintain the peace and stability of the boundless heaven continent. Of course, the 49 heavenly god envoys would not appear at the same time. They were divided into 7 teams and took turns every few decades. Every time, 7 god envoys would be dispatched to patrol the continent. God King Stellar Aspect was one of the 49 heavenly god envoys. 8 years ago, his team left the God Emperor's palace, and the 7 god envoys began patrolling the boundless heaven continent and handling various affairs. In these 8 years, he had patrolled 5 regions. 3 of the regions were as peaceful as ever. Only 2 regions had some thorny problems that required his supervision, control, and handling. Not long ago, a problem had arisen in Sanchuan region. The Sanchuan region lord reported the situation to the Azura God Emperor through the God Prayer Altar and asked for help. However, the Azura God Emperor did not receive the news. The deputy commander of the heavenly god envoys was responsible for guarding the God Emperor's palace's all-life altar and receiving requests and messages from the various region lords. The deputy commander would not disturb the Azura god emperor at all for such unimportant matters. He could have just sent any heavenly god envoy to handle it. After receiving the deputy commander's message, God King Stellar Aspect rushed to Sanchuan region to handle the affairs. The matter was not too serious, but it was very complicated and cumbersome, thus delaying him for 2 months. Soon, the pile of troublesome matters had finally been settled. God King Stellar Aspect finally heaved a sigh of relief and prepared to leave Sanchuan region for the next region. However, at this moment, the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong managed to contact him and sent him a message for help. When he learned that 4 divine kings had invaded the Cloud Realm and the Golden Dragon domain and started a massacre, killing innocent people, he was instantly enraged. Those 4 god kings were actually so savage, openly breaking the rules and violating the rules set by the God Emperor. They must be severely punished. Moreover, he was preparing to travel and relax for a period of time, but he encountered such a troublesome matter, so he was naturally resentful. Filled with anger, God King Stellar Aspect traveled day and night to the Golden Dragon region. Jing Feihong and the Golden Dragon Realm's ruler treated him with great hospitality and gave him a detailed explanation of the situation. Thus, God King Stellar Aspect ordered the 2 of them to transfer nearly 100 higher deity lords from the Cloud Yang and Golden Dragon regions. Then, he led the 2 area masters and hundreds of Sir Gods to the Golden Dragon Abyss. Why haven't these people left? Stellar Aspect surveyed his surroundings and could not help but frown when he saw thousands of divine lords around him. As the Oracle of Haotian, he was used to being mysterious and did not like to show his face in front of ordinary people. The Golden Dragon Realm Lord hurriedly explained, "Please forgive me, Divine Envoy, I heard from my subordinates that something strange has occurred in the Abyss. According to past practice, the Divine Fire seal at the Abyss entrance should have been sealed a few days ago. However, for some unknown reason, the gap in the seal has yet to close. Those Sir Gods are still hoping for a fluke and are unwilling to leave." Divine King Stellar Aspect frowned and asked, "It has always been normal in the past. Only this time, something strange has happened. Then, does this anomaly have something to do with those 4 deity kings?" The Golden Dragon Realm Lord thought for a moment and said with an uncertain tone, "Perhaps." Divine King Stellar Aspect maintained his cold expression as he continued asking, "It has been so long since you fought with them. Are you sure they have not fled and are still in the Abyss?" The Golden Dragon Realm Lord hurriedly nodded and answered with a very certain tone, "Those 4 deity kings were extremely arrogant and did not take me seriously at all. Furthermore, they are certain that there are many treasures and resources in the Abyss. How could they bear to flee? I even sent my subordinates to stand guard here and keep an eye on the Abyss entrance to ensure that they have not come out." Jing Feihong thought for a moment and asked with a frown, "Brother Long, is there only one entrance to the Abyss? Are you sure there are no other exits?" The Golden Dragon Realm Lord nodded with certainty. "Yes, very sure." Divine King Stellar Aspect raised his palm and said in a deep voice, "In that case, there's no time to lose. Let's enter the Abyss immediately and capture those 4 deity kings. In addition, get those fellows who have nothing better to do to scram. Don't be an eyesore here." Upon hearing Divine King Stellar Aspect's order, the Golden Dragon Realm Lord knew that he was getting impatient. However, the Golden Dragon Realm Lord could only bite the bullet and remind him, "Lord Divine Envoy, I'm afraid it's not appropriate for us to enter the Abyss just like that. Firstly, the Abyss is filled with 7-colored divine flames. That is the Earth Core divine fire at the godly monarch level. The 100 Sir Gods that we have deployed will definitely suffer heavy losses once they enter the Abyss. Their movements will also be very slow. In addition, you might not know this, but the Abyss underground is extremely vast. It stretches for millions of kilometers. We are lacking in manpower. To find those 4 deity kings in such a vast sea of lava is as difficult as ascending to the heavens." Not only did Divine King Stellar Aspect frown, but his eyes also narrowed as a cold glint flashed in them. He was somewhat infuriated as he cursed inwardly, "Darn bastard, does this king need you to remind me? Since you know everything and have long thought of a countermeasure and plan, why did you invite this king here?" However, he could only criticize inwardly. He did not flare up on the surface as he asked in a deep voice, "Then, do you mean that we will not enter the abyss and will just wait here for the 4 deity kings to come out?" Ah! The Golden Dragon Realm Lord hesitated for a moment before nodding with a bitter smile. "Yes, that's the only way for now." Divine King Stellar Aspect's frown deepened as he asked in a somewhat displeased tone, "Just wait here? If they stay in the abyss for 3 to 5 years without coming out, do we have to wait here for a few years as well?" This king represents His Holiness the God Emperor and shoulders the sacred responsibility of patrolling the boundless heaven continent. How can this king waste time here? Divine King Stellar Aspect put on the airs of a divine envoy with great authority. Jing Feihong and the Golden Dragon Realm Lord immediately felt a headache as their hearts clenched. When they decided to seek help from the divine envoy, they had expected such a situation to occur. They did not expect such a situation to occur the moment Divine King Stellar Aspect arrived at the abyss entrance. Helpless, the duo could only bite the bullet and persuade him while apologizing to him. "Lord Divine Envoy, please calm your anger. You hold a high position and shoulder the heavy responsibility of protecting the entire continent. How can we dare to waste your time? Lord Divine Envoy, please calm your anger. This subordinate was inconsiderate. This subordinate deserves death. However, Lord Divine Envoy, please calm down. Those 4 deity kings are extremely insolent. It's impossible for them to wait that long. At most, half a month. At least, 3 to 5 days. They will definitely appear." "All right." Divine King Stellar Aspect nodded as he said with a gloomy expression, "Then, we'll set half a month as the deadline. If they still do not appear by then, we'll proceed according to this king's plan." Chapter 3397. Unknowingly, another 4 days passed. Godly King Stellar Aspect, Jing Feihong, and the Golden Dragon Domain Lord waited patiently at the entrance to the abyss. Nearly 100 high divine lords had followed their instructions and set up ambushes around the entrance. Even though Ji Tianqing and Chao Qingyu had yet to appear, they had all prepared themselves mentally. However, they were all mentally prepared to not retreat for less than half a month. In addition, the 40+ factions around the abyss had all retreated further away. Although the Golden Dragon Domain Lord had obeyed Godly King Stellar Aspect's orders and chased them away. The leaders of many factions had recognized the Golden Dragon Domain Lord. They had all guessed that Jing Feihong was definitely another godly king. As for the leader, Godly King Stellar Aspect, his aura was even more powerful and dignified. His status was definitely higher than the Golden Dragon Domain Lords. In addition, the 3 godly king experts had brought nearly 100 high divine lords to surround the entrance to the abyss. Even a fool could tell that something big had happened. Something earth-shattering was definitely going to happen. Who would be willing to miss this once-in-a-lifetime show? Thus, the thousands of godly lords of the 40+ factions were unwilling to leave the Golden Dragon Abyss. In order not to be an eyesore to the 3 godly kings, they would rather retreat 10,000 kilometers away and silently observe the situation at the entrance to the abyss. For days passed in the outside world. Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, Yank, and the others had already been in seclusion for half a year in the distorted spacetime. In this half a year, Chao Qingyu had focused on cultivation and did his best to consolidate his foundation at the 4th level of the Godly King realm. Yank had also done his best to increase his strength and was gradually approaching the peak of the 4th level of the Godly King realm. His combat strength had also increased. As for Ji Tianqing, he had already completely refined the remaining 6 divine spark fragments. This had allowed his strength at the 2nd level of the Godly King realm to be even more stable, and his combat strength had increased significantly. Furthermore, the number of divine Tao laws he had mastered had increased to 400. When the time was up, Ji Tianqing ended his cultivation. However, he did not leave, nor did he awaken Yang and Chao Qingyu. He frowned as he pondered, I've already been in seclusion for 2 years. Only half a month in the outside world. Although I've gained a lot from this trip, breaking through to the second level of the godly king realm and my combat strength, I haven't been able to create the sword. However, I haven't had the time to forge the Heaven Burier sword. Why don't I take this opportunity to help it advance to the king level? Ever since Ji Tianqing came into contact with God King experts, every time he fought with a God King expert, he would be at a disadvantage because of his divine weapon. Everyone else had a king-grade divine artifact, but his heaven-burying sword was still at the monarch grade. Even if his battle prowess was the same as others, his hands and feet would be tied, and he would not be able to unleash his full strength. God King King Realm Divine Sword of Divine Tao. King Divine Swords Divine God, Divine to Heaven, to upgrade to Sword to Divine Sword to the Sword of Sword. God King God. Divine to God of Divine to God King, to Heaven Divine Divine to Him of Divine to be. He used his mind to contact buried Heaven, who had been in a deep slumber for a long time, and told him that he wanted to reforge the divine sword. Burial of Heaven had been waiting for this day for a long time. Once it confirmed that it had enough materials, it agreed without hesitation. Next, Ji Tianqing began to prepare things related to the reforging of the divine sword. Divine cauldrons or divine cauldrons were needed. The divine cauldrons in Kenshin's tomb and the divine weapon pavilion could be put to good use. It had been almost 100 years since he last used the divine cauldron. This time, Ji Tianqing took out the divine cauldron and placed it in the distorted spacetime. He had plenty of godly stones and resources in his interspatial ring, so he had plenty of them. Moreover, there was a sea of lava outside the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. He could extract endless 7-colored divine flames from it. Those were king-level divine flames, the purest divine flames in the Earth's core. They were most suitable for refining king-level divine weapons. Finally, Ji Tianqing took out a few more materials from his spatial ring. A bottle of galaxy gold sand, a portion of Xuanji source qi, and a 30,000-year-old divine dragon spine. He got these 3 materials from Chao Qingyu's cave abode. Fortunately, Chao Qingyu was cultivating in seclusion not far away and did not notice. Otherwise, Chao Qingyu would feel a little awkward if she saw him using these 3 materials to refine a weapon. In addition, Ji Tianqing took out 4 purple flame divine stones and a piece of 7 fire divine metal. The 7 fire divine metal had been refined by Yang and could be used to refine weapons. However, the purple flame divine stone was different. Ji Tianqing still needed to refine it into purple flame silver thread before it could be used. After all, the normal purple flame divine stone was only a supreme monarch level material. With everything ready, Ji Tianqing began to refine weapons. He took out 1 billion divine stones and placed them in the divine cauldron to support the divine flames. Then, he cast a spell to guide the 7-colored divine flames in the sea of lava into the divine cauldron. The 7-colored divine flames burned in the divine cauldron, and many arrays were activated, causing the divine flames to burn more vigorously and the temperature to rise rapidly. Next, Ji Tianqing placed the 4 purple flame divine stones into the cauldron and began to refine the purple flame silver thread. This task was not complicated, but it required a lot of skill and experience. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing was very experienced. He had done this many times in the past, so he was very familiar with this task now. Half a month later, the 4 purple flame divine stones disappeared and turned into thousands of purple flame silver thread. Every single silver strand was 10 zhang long. Light swirled around them, and they burned with intense purple flames. They looked extremely gorgeous. All 5 materials were ready. Ji Tianqing placed the Burial of Heaven sword into the divine cauldron and began to refine the Burial of Heaven sword into a ball of golden liquid. Half a month later, he began to add materials into the divine cauldron. Each material had to be added at a different time, and their effects were also different. This required an experienced divine blacksmith to accurately fuse the materials with the sword embryo through the divine flames and the divine cauldron's fine control. All in all, this task took a very long time and was very complicated. God King level divine weapons were not something that just any God King could refine. Time passed quickly. 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, another half a year passed in the blink of an eye. Yang and Chao Qingyu came out of seclusion and stopped cultivating. The two of them were still wondering why Ji Tianqing had not woken them up after such a long time. When the two of them saw a divine cauldron the size of a palace under the blood flame's sacred tree, they understood what was going on. What is young master doing? Is he refining a divine pill? Maybe he's refining a divine weapon. I think I heard young master say that he's planning to refine a divine sword. Let's go and take a look. Yank raised his eyebrows and said instigated. Yes. Chao Qingyu nodded in agreement without hesitation. He said expectantly, my skill in refining is very ordinary. I'll definitely benefit a lot from watching young master refine a divine weapon. You're very sneaky, kid. Yank looked at him from the corner of his eyes and said unhappily, you must have benefited a lot from following master for so long, right? Of course, not. Chao Qingyu naturally did not want to admit it. He just felt a little guilty and quickly turned his face away. Yan Ku stared at him for a while and suddenly realized something. He exclaimed in surprise. How did you break through to Tier 4? Chapter 3398. Yank's eyes widened as he revealed an expression of disbelief. Chao Qingyu was rather proud and could not help but puff out his chest. He smiled and said, how is it? I'm also a middle divine king now, the same realm as you. In the future, you don't have the right to show off in front of me. You. Yank frowned and said with jealousy, I already said that young master gave you a lot of benefits and you still don't want to admit it? So what if I did? Chao Qingyu simply admitted it and said proudly, you're jealous, right? You, damn it. Yank's face darkened and said angrily, so what if we're at the same realm? You just broke through to the 4th realm and I'm already at the peak of the 4th realm. If you're not convinced, let's fight now, how about it? TSK. What a waste of time. I still want to watch young master refine weapons. Chao Qingyu rolled his eyes and flew towards the 9 heavens cauldron. In the past, he would not have such an expression. After following Ji Tianqing for a long time, he rolled his eyes very smoothly. Yan Ku suppressed his anger and hurriedly followed him. In the blink of an eye, the two of them arrived near the 9 heavens cauldron. At this time, the two of them saw that Ji Tianqing was sitting cross-legged in the distorted space and was concentrating on casting the divine skill. He was absorbing the power of the blood flame sacred tree to maintain his divine power at the peak while casting the divine skill to control the 9 heavens cauldron. Both of his hands were holding the divine skill and shooting out rays of 5-colored divine light to adjust the flame in the 9 heavens cauldron and control the sword embryo and a few other materials. Looking at his skill, Yank and Chao Qingyu could not take their eyes off him and revealed a look of curiosity and surprise. The two of them temporarily forgot about their anger and started to discuss in a low voice. What kind of skill is young master using? Why can't I understand it? He. You're a big guy and your brain is not enough. How can you understand it? Humph. Don't look down on me, as if you can understand it. Although I don't understand it very well, I'm observing and learning. I despise you. Immune to contempt. The two of them bickered, but their eyes were fixed on the divine cauldron and Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's refining skills, casting techniques, and timing were all perfect. The subtle changes in the divine cauldron also indicated that the divine sword would continue to strengthen, and the sword embryo would gradually take shape. Yank and Chao Qingyu saw this and learned many skills from it. Soon, another half a year had passed. Ji Tianqing had been refining the sword of burial of heaven for an entire year. However, it seemed that his refining work was not even halfway done yet. After fusing with the 5 materials, the sword embryo underwent a new transformation, and its shape was basically confirmed. However, Ji Tianqing still had to make some minor adjustments to sort out the internal structure of the divine sword, down to every grain of metal and every vein. This took another 3 months. Next was the most important part of refining the divine sword. Inscribing law divine marks and divine formation divine marks. The biggest difference between king-grade divine artifacts and monarch-grade divine artifacts was that king-grade divine craftsmen could inscribe divine Dao laws onto weapons, armors, and other items. Meanwhile, divine lord-level experts could only grasp and use divine Dao laws, but could not apply them onto equipment. In addition, the formation patterns inscribed on king-grade divine artifacts were often called restrictions. The more laws and restrictions a divine artifact contained, the stronger its power. Of course, the level of the laws and restrictions also had to be high enough. An ordinary king-grade divine artifact could condense 100 types of laws and thousands of restrictions, and it was a qualified low-grade king-grade divine artifact. Meanwhile, a middle-grade king-grade divine artifact needed at least 300 types of laws and 3,000 restrictions. As for a high-grade king-grade divine artifact, it needed 900 types of laws and 9,000 restrictions. As for a supreme-grade king-grade divine artifact, that was a divine item that only existed in legends. It was said that it appeared in the ancient era, but it had not been heard of in the past 10,000 years. A supreme-grade king-grade divine artifact needed at least 1,800 types of laws and 18,000 restrictions. Even Kenshin in his previous life did not grasp that many divine Dao laws. The previous sword of burial of heaven, at its peak, was merely a high-grade king-grade divine artifact. Even so, it had once been ranked in the top 10 of the divine world's divine artifact rankings. Ji Tianqing was still focused on casting spells. He was inscribing divine runes of laws and divine runes of array Dao on the brand new Heaven Burier sword. This work was very meticulous, and there was no room for error. Therefore, his inscribing speed was not fast, and his mind was also fully focused. Chao Qingyu and Yank kept their mouths shut and watched attentively, afraid that they would miss any details. 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, half a year, time passed quickly, but the 3 of them did not notice. After a full 2 years, Ji Tianqing had inscribed 300 types of laws and 3,000 restrictions on the sword of burial of heaven. Only now did he stop inscribing divine patterns and carry out the final finishing work. Chao Qingyu and Yank were already stunned and could not help but exclaim. "Oh my God! Young Master actually inscribed 300 divine runes of laws and 3,000 types of formation restrictions on the divine sword. Mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. He actually made a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact in one go. Isn't this too exaggerated? Could he be a medium divine blacksmith? A divine king who could make a king-grade divine artifact was no longer a blacksmith, but a divine blacksmith. However, divine blacksmiths were also divided into lower, middle, and upper levels. Among them, lesser divine blacksmiths were more common. Divine kings like Chao Qingyu and Yank could become lesser divine blacksmiths after 1,000 years of refining. However, medium divine blacksmiths were rarer, and there were only 1 or 2 in 10 divine kings. As for higher divine blacksmiths, they were even more of a legendary existence, and there were only a few of them in the entire continent. Chao Qingyu and Yank knew this, so how could they not be shocked? "We're rich. We can watch a medium divine blacksmith forge up close. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Look at you, don't be so excited. As long as we follow young master, we just need to serve him well and do our duty. There will be many opportunities to watch in the future." 3 days later, Ji Tianqing's forging was completely finished. The 9 heavens cauldron stopped spinning, and the endless divine flames were finally extinguished. Swoosh! After the cauldron's lid was opened, a 4-foot-long, pitch-black divine sword flew out of the cauldron. This was the new Burial of Heaven sword that had completed its upgrade and transformation. It was longer and wider than an ordinary divine sword, straight and upright, but also mysterious and gloomy, containing a bone-chilling aura of death. Originally, the Burial of Heaven sword that Kenshin wielded back then was a mighty sword of light, with divine light and no gloomy aura of death. But now, the Burial of Heaven sword had become like this. Ji Tianxing held the Burial of Heaven sword with both hands, frowning as he observed it for a moment. He couldn't help but mutter, "I thought it was caused by the origin stones, and that it would return to its original state after you restored the king-grade divine artifact. I didn't expect that after fusing so many king-grade materials, it would still be as black as ink, gloomy and cold. Could it be related to our experience?" The Burial of Heaven's deep voice sounded in his mind, perhaps. Otherwise, why would it carry the aura of death? You can only slowly solve this problem in the future. Chapter 3399. Alright, you should get used to the new sword body first. Ji Tianxing instructed the Burial of Heaven and kept the Burial of Heaven sword. When he kept the 9th heaven cauldron back into the divine weapon chamber, he saw Yank and Chao Qingyu discussing in the distorted spacetime not far away. "I haven't informed you, why have you come out of seclusion?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked the both of them. Chao Qingyu and Yank stopped their discussion and hurriedly flew over to greet him. "Greetings, young master." "Greetings, Lord." After greeting him, Chao Qingyu explained, "Young master, before we went into seclusion, you said that you would wake us up 2 years later. We kept thinking about it and came out of seclusion when the time was up. In the end, when we came, you were still refining the divine sword, so we didn't dare to disturb you and just waited by the side." Yank added on, "My lord's armament refining skills and techniques are something we have never heard of before, so we just observed from the side. I hope my lord doesn't blame us." Ji Tianxing sized them up and laughed lightly, "Not bad, the both of you are quite ambitious. During this seclusion, Qingyu has broken through to the 4th stage realm and Yank's ability has also increased by quite a bit. Very good." Compared to Chao Qingyu and Yank, his improvement was the greatest. Not only did he break through to the next realm, he had mastered 400 God Tao laws and even reforged the Burial of Heaven sword. In total, his battle power had increased by 10 times. The results of this seclusion were satisfactory and Ji Tianxing was very satisfied. "Alright, we have been delayed here for 4 years and 1 month has passed outside. It's time for us to leave." Saying that, he led Chao Qingyu and Yank away from the blood flame sacred tree and flew towards the outside. Yank hurriedly followed up and asked him, "My lord, did you teach Chao Qingyu some remarkable secret skill? Or did he give him some kind of treasure? Otherwise, based on his talent and aptitude, how could he possibly become a middle-level divine king? You see, I've also reached the peak of the 4th level, why don't you also?" Before Yank could finish, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted him. He said with a faint smile, "Did you forget what I said before? As long as you perform well and are loyal to your duty." Yank didn't need to finish his sentence to know what he meant. He quickly nodded and said, "Understood." Understood. To put it bluntly, he had only followed Ji Tianxing for a short period of time, and his contributions were not enough. He was not qualified to be taught by Ji Tianxing. The 3 of them didn't say anything more. They left the distorted spacetime together and flew out of the 9 heavens 10 absolutes tower. Shwa! With a flash of white light, the 3 of them appeared outside the divine tower, standing in the air above the sea of lava. Looking around, the lava sea within a radius of 1,000 miles was still calm. The heaven-destroying sword formation that blotted out the sky was still operating on its own. Starlight flickered. Ji Tianxing checked and found that the heaven-destroying sword formation was not damaged at all, nor had it been attacked. We have been cultivating in seclusion for so long, and half a month has passed in the outside world, but no one has come here. The sword formation is also not damaged. It seems that the forces that entered the abyss to explore have all left. Chao Qingyu nodded in agreement. He asked, Master, should we continue to explore and search for treasures, or should we leave the abyss? Yang frowned and reminded him, we already know that the mineral veins and resources that appeared on the reef islands were bait deliberately released by Qi Fei. In the past 2 months, a few thousand Sir Gods from dozens of forces swept through the lava sea. Now that Qi Fei is dead, there shouldn't be many resources and treasures left in the lava sea, right? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, even if there are some resources and treasures left, they are the leftovers of others, and we don't need them. Let's leave the abyss first and continue south. I still have many things to do. Indeed. He had returned to the divine king realm, and the sword of burial of heaven had been restored to the king level. He might not be able to do whatever he wanted in the divine world, but he could at least cross the 4 continents and the various seas easily. He wanted to return to the chaotic land and look for his old subordinates. Moreover, he wanted to go to the dragon realm as soon as possible to find Wuhan. Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh! Divine light flashed, Ji Tianqing and the other 2 streaked across the sky like lightning, heading straight for the exit of the abyss. Even though the sky above the lava sea was filled with the 7-colored divine flames. After Qi Fei died, the 7-colored divine flames were not controlled by anyone, and they became especially turbulent and violent. The 7-colored divine flames that filled the abyss were several times more than normal. Not only were they more violent, but their density was also more terrifying. Even Ji Tianqing and the other 2's flying speed was affected, and they slowed down a little. If an ordinary Sir God came, it would be almost impossible for them to move, and they would be burned to ashes in a short while. Fortunately, the journey was peaceful, and there were no incidents. 2 days later, Ji Tianqing and the other 2 returned to the exit, and flew along the abyss to the surface. In the process of flying, they found that the 7-colored divine flames in the abyss that was about 10,000 miles deep had increased by several times. Under such circumstances, Sir Gods could not enter at all. The 3 were getting closer and closer to the surface, and they were about to leave the abyss. Chao Qingyu could not help but sigh, this golden dragon abyss has been prosperous for thousands of years, and it has attracted countless Sir Gods to explore. It was unknown how many people had been buried here, and how many people had obtained opportunities here. But from now on, this abyss can be considered to have declined. Not only will no Sir Gods be able to enter, but the treasures and resources in the abyss will also wither. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, this was originally a trap set by Qi Fei. Every 100 years, he will devour a batch of Sir Gods, so it's good that it's destroyed. Compared to the many Sir Gods who died tragically here, the resources in the abyss are actually nothing. Chao Qingyu smiled and said emotionally, but this is the nature of the god race. They selectively ignore the cannon fodder and the dead, and only focus on the lucky ones who have made a fortune and obtained opportunities. This is because they also desire to be the lucky ones, to stand out from the many Sir Gods and not be mediocre. Yang felt the same, and said with a complicated tone, only one genius can be born out of 100 mediocre people. But everyone only sees the halo of a genius, and chooses to ignore the sacrifice of 99 mediocre people. While the 3 were talking, they had already flown out of the abyss. Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh! In a flash of divine light, they returned to the surface. After passing through the gap in the divine flame's light shield, they completely left the abyss and flew back into the blue sky. Before they could see their surroundings clearly, they heard 2 cold voices gnashing their teeth. Damn bastards, you're finally out. Ha ha ha. This king's long wait was not in vain. You're finally here. Hearing these 2 familiar voices, Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang looked up. They saw the white-robed golden dragon region master and silver-armored Jing Feihong staring at them from above, their faces filled with hatred and cold smiles. The three of them looked around and saw that nearly 100 high divine lords had already surrounded them. Chapter 3400. The Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong were filled with hatred. They looked like they were about to spit fire from their eyes as they gritted their teeth. The hundreds of upper-level deity lords in different attire around them were also cold and murderous, silent and solemn. Ji Tianqing probed further with his deific consciousness and discovered that there were 5 emperor-level divine formations hidden around them. There were formations for concealment, suppression, sealing, and attack. It was a complete set. Faced with such a situation, Ji Tianqing and the other two were only slightly surprised. There was no hint of panic or worry. Yank was the first to speak, mocking with a sneer, "Oh, isn't this the Golden Dragon Region Lord? More than a month ago, you ran away like a stray dog. How dare you come back for revenge today? Have you grown bolder? Or did you hate him so much that you've lost your mind?" Chao Qingyu looked at Jing Feihong with feigned surprise and sneered, "You don't know, Yank. That's the Region Lord, Jing Feihong. You may not know this, but Lord Jing was defeated by young master as well. He was beaten up badly. I was wondering why the Golden Dragon Region Lord dared to come back and ambush us. It turns out that he found Jing Feihong to help him." Yank pretended to be enlightened and nodded, "I see. No wonder the Golden Dragon Region Lord is so bold and arrogant. However, you're too blind, Region Lord. Why did you ask Jing Feihong for help? He was defeated by our young master as well. You two stray dogs are no match for our young master even if you join forces. You'll still be beaten up today." Yan Ku and Chao Qingyu's sarcastic tone made Jing Feihong and the Golden Dragon Realm's ruler so angry that their faces turned ashen, and their chests rose and fell rapidly. "Despicable beasts, don't you dare be so arrogant. Let's see how long you can be smug. Laugh, laugh as much as you like. This king guarantees that you won't even have time to cry later." Jing Feihong and the Golden Dragon Region Lord cursed through gritted teeth, their faces filled with malicious grins. At this moment, Ji Tianqing finally spoke. He looked calmly at the two territorial rulers, a cold smile on his lips as he said, "I originally thought that the lesson I gave you last time was enough, and that you wouldn't dare to come back for revenge. I didn't expect the two of you to join forces. However, with just the two of you and more than 100 Sir Gods, you want to seek revenge from this king? How naive. If I'm not wrong, you should have found a stronger backer. For example, the other domain lords, or experts above the domain lords. Otherwise, where did you get the confidence to speak to me like this?" It was indeed beyond Ji Tianqing's expectations that the Golden Dragon Realm ruler and Jing Feihong would join forces and set up an ambush here. But since it had already happened, he immediately accepted the reality. Based on this, he deduced that the other party still had powerful reinforcements, but they were hiding them temporarily. As expected, the Golden Dragon Domain Master and Jing Feihong both grinned coldly. "Ha ha ha. Although you little bastard are hateful, you're not stupid. Tianqing, it doesn't matter how smart or cunning you are. It's useless. Your time of death has come. Today, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. You will die without a doubt." After saying that, the two of them looked at each other, bowed at the same time, and retreated. They shouted in unison, "Welcome, Divine Envoy Haotian." As their sonorous voices rang out, a God Clan man, who was 30 meters tall, had 6 colorful wings, blood-red eyes, and a head full of golden hair, stepped out. Swoosh! As soon as this person appeared, he brought with him an invisible divine power that covered the entrance of the abyss, which was thousands of miles wide. The unparalleled divine power that suppressed the heavens and the earth was like a flood, pressing down on Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yank. In an instant, the sneers on Chao Qingyu and Yang's faces froze, and their brows furrowed tightly. Their eyes also became serious. Who is this guy? His strength is a medium divine king. And he's at the peak of the 5th tier. Only Ji Tianqing's expression did not change. He stared at the 30-meter-tall divine king's stellar aspect and shook his head. No, not the peak of the 5th tier, but the initial stage of the 6th tier. 6th tier of the divine king realm. Upon hearing this news, Chao Qingyu and Yang's expressions changed again, and their eyes became even more serious. They were still full of confidence a moment ago, but now, it was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over them, and their backs turned cold. 6th stage God King experts were not commonly seen in the continent. Among the hundreds of territorial lords, only 30% of them could reach this level. Furthermore, these territorial lords were located in the middle of the continent, occupying the most prosperous and affluent regions. For example, the Northern Heaven Domain, the Cloud Domain, and the Golden Dragon Domain were located at the borders of the boundless Heaven continent. In comparison, they were more barren, and it was almost impossible to see a 6th-tier Divine King. Divine King's stellar aspect looked down at Ji Tianqing from above, and his lips curled into a cold smile. Kid, to be able to maintain your composure after seeing this king, you must be having a hard time holding on, right? Do you know who this king is? Do you know that this king has waited here for a month for the both of you? This is your honor. To be able to make this king wait for so long, and to receive this king's judgment and punishment, you should be proud and grateful. Divine King's stellar aspect changed his gloomy image from before, and became spirited. His voice boomed like a bell, and his aura was incomparably dignified. This was because his identity had already been announced. Not only were the crowd present, but there were also thousands of divine lords waiting to watch the show in the sky above the forest thousands of miles away. No matter what, Divine King's stellar aspect had to maintain the dignity and dominance of Divine Envoy Haotian. He must not disgrace the dignity of the God Emperor. After all, he was the envoy of the Azura God Emperor on the continent. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked at Divine King's stellar aspect. He said with a teasing smile, "There's no need to introduce yourself. Haven't those two fellows already shouted out? Divine Envoy Haotian." Right, what's Divine Envoy Haotian? Why hasn't this king heard of it before? Could it be a self-given title? As he said that, he turned his head to ask Chao Qingyu and Yang, "Have the two of you heard of Divine Envoy Haotian?" No. Chao Qingyu shook his head honestly. After all, he had left the vast heaven continent for 10,000 years and had only returned this year. He still did not understand the changes in the vast heaven continent. Yang frowned. After thinking for a moment, he explained, "I haven't heard of Divine Envoy Haotian, but I know of Chaos Divine Envoy. They are the envoys under the God Emperor, and they patrol the continent on behalf of the God Emperor, handling all sorts of miscellaneous matters." Ji Tianqing understood and nodded. Oh, so they are the envoys of the Azura God Emperor, patrolling guards. Seeing the trio's reaction, Divine King's stellar aspect frowned as his eyes shimmered with a cold glint. "Kid, since you know this king's identity, why aren't you kneeling? Are you looking down on the dignity of His Majesty the God Emperor? Do you want to be executed?" The Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong stood behind Divine King's stellar aspect. They were overjoyed when they saw Ji Tianqing and company ridiculing them without a care. The two of them looked at each other and could not help but communicate through voice transmissions, letting out joyful cheers. "Ha ha ha ha, look at their dumb looks. They are simply too stupid. Ha ha ha, they are indeed arrogant enough. They don't even care about Divine Envoy Haotian. They are dead for sure now. Even the heavens can't save them." Chapter 3401. The more arrogant Ji Tianqing and company were and the worse their attitude toward godly King Stellar Aspect, the more the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong gloated. They invited godly King Stellar Aspect to uphold justice. Relying on godly King Stellar Aspect's strength was secondary. Most importantly, they wanted to borrow godly King Stellar Aspect's status and authority to suppress and punish Ji Tianqing and company. Regardless of where Ji Tianqing and company came from, what background they had, or what schemes they had, it was all useless in front of Divine Emissary Haotian. Even if they had powerful backers and backgrounds, they could not compare to Divine Emissary Haotian. This was because Divine Emissary Haotian was an emissary of the Azura God Emperor. Offending Divine Emissary Haotian was equivalent to offending the Azura God Emperor. It was not tolerated by the entire boundless heaven continent. When that happened, Ji Tianqing and company would be consigned to eternal damnation. The Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong could sit back and watch the show. They could wait to see them suffer the wrath of the Azura God Emperor. At that moment, godly King Stellar Aspect was already enraged. He was berating Ji Tianqing and company. The show was about to begin. How could they not be excited and look forward to it? Facing godly King Stellar Aspect's pressure, Ji Tianqing remained indifferent. He said coldly, "Firstly, you are only the Azura God Emperor's lackey and not the Azura God Emperor himself. Even if I meet the Azura God Emperor, I will not kneel and greet him, much less you. Secondly, you did not ask for the truth and listen to the slanderous words of those two region lords. Don't you think that's too foolish? You don't even know that you are being used by the two of them and are still flaunting your prowess here. What right do you have to be Divine Emissary Haotian?" Although godly King Stellar Aspect had nothing to do with him. But godly King Stellar Aspect did not have much of a relationship with the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong. Under such circumstances, godly King Stellar Aspect, as the divine emissary who patrolled the continent, should maintain a fair and just attitude. Regardless of the matter, he should let both parties confront each other and determine who was in the wrong before dealing with punishment. This was the attitude of a divine emissary. Haotian would not sully the reputation of the Azura God Emperor. However, godly King Stellar Aspect did not do so. He had been waiting at the entrance of the abyss for a month. He was already burning with anger, and hated Ji Tianqing and the others. Therefore, he was destined not to listen to Ji Tianqing's words. "Ha ha ha! Brat! Kid! How dare you insult me? Looking down on His Holiness the God Emperor? Who do you think you are? How dare you teach me how to handle matters? Godly King Stellar Aspects Divine Emissaries King, SSSS. Stellar King Stellar Aspect Stellar Emperor Stellar Sunday was Stellar King Haotian was. Don't try to confuse right and wrong, invert black and white, and sow discord between this king and the two domain lords. Let me tell you clearly, you're finished. Stellar Divine U. S. Just based on the fact that you looked down on His Majesty the God Emperor and spoke arrogant words to insult this king, you have committed an unforgivable capital crime. Don't even think of quibbling or struggling. Accept your punishment. As he spoke, Stellar Aspect raised his right hand and gradually clenched his fist. He bellowed with an authoritative tone, "These three fanatics have already violated the Divine Emperor's heavenly decree. Their crimes are punishable by death. Everyone, listen up. Kill the criminal immediately. Execute him without mercy." Following God King Stellar Aspect's order, nearly 100 fully armed High Divine Lords brandished their divine weapons in unison, besieging Ji Tianqing's group of three. Everyone gave it their all and used their strongest killing moves. They released divine arch shadows that blotted out the sky and rained down on the trio. Swoosh! Swoosh! Nearly 10,000 divine light blades blotted out the sky for hundreds of kilometers. They immediately drowned out Ji Tianqing and company. The trio was in an extremely perilous situation, but they remained composed and did not panic. As the divine light blades rained down on them, Yang and Chao Qingyu drew their sabers and swords, using their divine abilities to counterattack. Moreover, the two of them also released a vast amount of divine power, forming a thick divine light shield to protect themselves. Ji Tianqing did not conjure a defensive shield. He looked up at the divine art light raining down on him and actually opened his arms. If not for the divine light radiating from his body and him using some sort of divine ability or mystic technique, anyone would think that he was waiting for death. After all, he looked as though he was hugging the divine light blades. Borrowing strength to fight strength, a tooth for a tooth. Double rebound. Ji Tianqing bellowed as he released boundless black and white divine light that condensed into a gigantic ball of light. The ball of light was black and white, spinning rapidly like a yin-yang diagram. The two energies fused together, appearing extremely mysterious and profound. Bam! 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 The boundless divine art light blades rained down on the black and white ball of light, producing a series of dull booms. What happened next left everyone dumbfounded. The thousands of divine art light blades did not shatter. Instead, they pierced into the black and white ball of light and passed through it unscathed, accelerating toward the surrounding higher divine lords. On the surface, the divine art light blades did not seem to have changed. However, everyone was an expert and could clearly sense that after the divine art light blades passed through the black and white ball of light, not only did they double in speed, their power also doubled. Clearly, Ji Tianqing was borrowing strength to fight strength. He was using the attacks of the divine lords to multiply their power before changing targets to attack those higher divine lords. He did not expend much energy, but the power of his attacks was abnormally terrifying. Boom! 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 The next moment, the thousands of divine light blades struck the surrounding divine lords, producing deafening booms. Those high divine lords all exploded into balls of dazzling divine light, blood and bits of flesh that filled the sky. In the blink of an eye, more than 30 higher divine lords were severely injured, their divine bodies crumbling on the spot. Only a few of them were relatively lucky. After their divine bodies were destroyed, they still had a divine spark left. They fled the battlefield in a panic. As for the divine lords who were struck, their divine bodies and divine sparks crumbled together, dying on the spot. Both sides had only exchanged one blow, but Ji Tianqing had already dealt a heavy blow to his opponents with his incomparably exquisite and bizarre divine abilities and secret techniques. Nearly 100 higher divine lords had been reduced by a third. The remaining 60-odd divine lords were also frightened out of their wits, their eyes filled with deep fear. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong also widened their eyes in disbelief. They could not help but exclaim. What's going on? It's only been a month. How did he become stronger again? Damn it! Wasn't he clearly injured before? Why is he completely fine? Why did he become even more ferocious? Jing Feihong and the Golden Dragon Domain Lord could not understand. They could not believe their eyes. God King Stellar Aspect's brows were tightly knitted together as his expression turned even darker. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Even Yang and Chao Qingyu were shocked by Ji Tianqing and could not help but exclaim. Wow! Young master, what divine ability is this? Why have I never seen you use it before? Young master, this divine ability of yours is simply incomparably exquisite and invincible. What's its name? Chapter 3402. Double Reflection. It's a divine ability that I figured out on my own when I was in seclusion. This is my first time using it. Let's test it out on them. Ji Tianqing smiled and explained to Yang and Chao Qingyu. Indeed, this divine ability mystic art was something he had figured out and created from the heaven vanquishing array diagram. Today was his first time using it, and the effects were pretty good. He was very satisfied. Of course, he also felt that this divine ability was not perfect. There were still many areas that could be improved upon. Only through actual combat could he discover the flaws and improve upon them in the future. Double reflection. Chao Qingyu and Yang frowned as they looked at Ji Tianqing with odd expressions. Young master, isn't the name you gave to this divine ability a little too casual? Your Excellency, this divine ability is so wondrous and powerful. I think you should give it a domineering name and not be so sloppy and perfunctory. Ji Tianqing had always been good at listening to different opinions. He thought seriously for a moment and nodded. All right, this name is indeed something I came up with at the last minute. It's a little sloppy. However, it's just a name. It's pretty good to be simple and straightforward. No matter how intimidating the name is, if the divine ability itself isn't exquisite enough, isn't it useless? Therefore, there's no need for the two of you to argue about the name. I think it's pretty good. Ah. Chao Qingyu was stunned and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yang thought seriously for a moment and nodded. Your Excellency, what you said makes a lot of sense. I agree. Just as he said that, Chao Qingyu glared at him and said with a mocking smile, Yank. Your bootlicking skills have improved, huh? Not far away, God King Stellar Aspect saw Ji Tianqing and company talking and laughing. He was immediately enraged and even angrier. Bastard! Do you think this king doesn't exist? Too arrogant. Courting death. God King Stellar Aspect roared angrily as he waved his hand again and gave the order to attack. Those 60+ high divine lords all looked like they had yet to recover from their shock, their hearts full of hesitation. Everyone looked at each other. After a moment of hesitation, they reluctantly brandished their swords and sabers, launching a second round of attacks on Ji Tianqing and the other two. The Golden Dragon Realm Master and Jing Feihong also furrowed their brows in worry and anxiety. At that moment, Godly King Stellar Aspect turned his head to look at the two of them and bellowed angrily, What are the two of you standing there for? Ha! The ruler of the Golden Dragon Domain was taken aback. Us? Jing Feihong pointed at the tip of his nose with a bitter expression. Both of them had been beaten up by Ji Tianqing before, leaving a shadow in their hearts. The ambush on Ji Tianqing was with Godly King Stellar Aspect present, so they did not plan on taking action. Unexpectedly, Godly King Stellar Aspect directly called him out. Nonsense! Do you want to watch a good show? Godly King Stellar Aspect glared angrily as he roared. The Golden Dragon Realm Master and Jing Feihong trembled in fright. They no longer dared to hesitate and could only bite the bullet and launch an attack. Bastard Tianqing, this king will fight it out with you. Bastard, hand over your life. The two of them roared angrily. They waved their divine weapons and used their most powerful techniques to attack Ji Tianqing and the other two. And at that moment, dozens of divine lords cast divine art shadows that filled the sky, drowning Ji Tianqing in company. The previous scene played out once again. Ji Tianqing's body emitted divine light that condensed into a gigantic black and white sphere of light that enveloped him, Yank, and Chao Qingyu. Whoosh! 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 Thousands of divine art shadows and divine powers blasted into the black and white sphere of light. After the divine light passed through the sphere of light, it appeared several times more powerful. It blasted at the divine lords at a much faster speed. The tragedy from before played out once again. Boom! 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 Another 40-odd high-level divine lords were struck by the thousands of divine light blades. They were instantly turned into fireworks that emitted resplendent divine light. Of course, it was inevitable that a rain of blood would splatter across the sky. Countless bits of flesh and bone would scatter. None of the 40-odd divine lords that were struck survived. All of them were reduced to ashes, their divine heads crumbling. There were only 20 or so high-level divine lords left, and they retreated in horror. They were so frightened that their guts were torn, and they did not dare to attack again. No matter what divine art they used or how powerful their combat strength was, they could not harm a single hair on Ji Tianqing's body. Instead, they would suffer double the damage and die to their own divine arts. What the hell is this? It's too strange and sinister, isn't it? How do I deal with it? What can I do? I'm also in despair. The 20-odd divine lords had all given up. They had lost all will to fight and were like eggplants that had been beaten by frost. Not far away, God King's stellar aspect witnessed all of this with his own eyes. He could not help but clench his fists in anger. Damn it! He was actually using those divine monarchs as whetstones to test out his newly created divine ability. Furthermore, he only used it once and was able to discover the flaws of the divine art and improve it. When he used that divine art again, its might would be 50% stronger and more natural. This punk's talent and perception are truly frightening. God King's stellar aspect was also extremely shocked. He was rather wary of Ji Tianqing. He had a premonition that Ji Tianqing was probably the strongest and most difficult opponent he had encountered during his inspection of the continent. Meanwhile, the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong also charged over with their weapons. They used divine arts that could sunder heaven and earth as they ruthlessly blasted at Ji Tianqing. As long as we are fast enough, he won't be able to reflect our attacks in time. Furthermore, if we join forces and attack together, as long as the power exceeds what he can withstand, he won't be able to reflect it and will only be severely injured. The two region lords exchanged looks and communicated with their divine senses. They were filled with confidence. They were both godly monarch experts, so they naturally understood the profundity of Ji Tianqing's divine art. They could also guess how to counter it. As long as their attacks were powerful enough to destroy the black and white ball of light, Ji Tianqing wouldn't be able to reflect it. However, dreams were beautiful, but reality was cruel. Swoosh! Swoosh! The divine arts used by the two region lords struck the black and white ball of light, but it was like a clay ox entering the sea. It didn't cause any ripples. The next instant, an even more dazzling divine art shadow flew out of the black and white ball of light. Its power had doubled, and it blasted towards the two region lords with a destructive force. Oh no! He still managed to reflect it. It's over. Dodge! The Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong's expressions changed drastically. They revealed intense fear in their eyes as they retreated in panic. Boom! Boom! The light of the divine spell, which could destroy heaven and earth, blasted into the two of them, causing an earth-shattering explosion. The two of them were sent flying. They opened their mouths and let out heart-wrenching screams as divine blood splattered all over their bodies. With just one strike, the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong were severely injured. They fell from the sky covered in blood. The Golden Dragon Region Lord had one of his legs severed, while Jing Feihong's waist had a bull-sized bloody hole. Their injuries were extremely tragic. Chapter 3403. Things were different now. In the past, when the two domain lords fought with Ji Tianqing, they would have to exchange a few hundred blows before a victor was decided. Now, Ji Tianqing had risen by a realm and his combat strength had increased by more than 10 times. He had even created a powerful divine power. The two domain lords were severely injured after exchanging a single blow with him. Not only were the two domain masters unable to accept such a drastic change, they were also inexplicably shocked. Even Ji Tianqing himself was somewhat surprised. The corners of his mouth curled into a teasing smile. I'm already that powerful. Interesting. I wonder how powerful my combat strength will be when I return to peak godly monarch. I'm really looking forward to it. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. His emotions were surging and he was filled with anticipation. At that moment, of the nearly 100 divine lords, there were only slightly more than 20 left. Furthermore, they were scared out of their wits and did not dare attack again. They had no combat strength to speak of. The 2 domain lords were also severely injured. Their confidence and fighting spirit had suffered a heavy blow and they had yet to recover from their shock. The only person who remained unscathed and had not attacked was Godly King Stellar Aspect. He could no longer pretend to be aloof and arrogant. All he could do was attack. "Kid, you do have some tricks up your sleeve." It's no wonder the 2 domain lords suffered greatly and could only seek help from this king. "You are not bad. However, only an expert like you is worthy of being this king's opponent. You are worthy of this king finishing personally." Godly King Stellar Aspect flexed his fists as he flapped his 6-colored wings. The blood pupil on his forehead also emitted a dark red divine light. His body ignited with towering sanguine flames as he released a suppressive might that swept towards Ji Tianqing and company. "Kid, your performance ends here. With this king personally taking action, you can rest in peace." As he spoke, Godly King Stellar Aspect conjured a divine seal with both hands as he used his divine power. Swish! Swish! The 8 bronze spears hanging from his waist automatically flew into the sky. They lit up with a blinding light as they emitted an unparalleled sharpness. "Kill!" Godly King Stellar Aspect bellowed as the 8 bronze spears flew out like bolts of lightning, attacking Ji Tianqing from different directions. Each of the bronze spears was a mid-level king-level divine artifact. They contained the power to pierce through everything. They pierced through the sky like auroras, heading straight for the black and white glowing balls. Inside the ball of light, Ji Tianqing, Yank, and Chao Qingyu's expressions turned grave. In the face of the 2 domain masters and the divine lords, they could not care less and be full of confidence. However, Godly King Stellar Aspect posed a great threat to them. The slightest bit of carelessness would put their lives in danger. After all, the difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great. Ji Tianqing did not say a word. Instead, he silently activated his divine power and activated the power of the black and white ball of light to its maximum. Bang! Bang bang bang! In the next moment, the 8 bronze spears pierced the black and white ball of light, causing a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens. This time, the black and white ball of light couldn't withstand it, and it couldn't reflect twice as much. With a loud boom, the black and white ball of light crumbled on the spot, exploding into divine light fragments that blotted out the sky. Ji Tianqing was sent flying as his divine power backlashed his organs. Golden divine blood gushed out of his mouth and nose. Yank and Chao Qinyu were also swept up by the shockwave. They flew more than 100 kilometers in a wretched state, their faces pale as they gasped for breath. Thankfully, after the 8 bronze spears shattered the black and white ball of light, their might was nearly depleted as they were sent flying back by the shockwave. Upon seeing this, Godly King Stellar Aspect heaved a sigh of relief as he revealed a contemptuous sneer. He. This king thought you were very strong. I really overestimated you. He was still worried that he might fail to shatter the black and white ball of light in one strike and suffer a double rebound. Not only would that embarrass him in front of everyone, but his life would also be in danger. He would definitely be in a wretched state. Therefore, he went all out from the start, hoping to shatter it in one strike. Thankfully, he did it. He saved his face, injured Ji Tianqing, and sent Yank and Chao Qinyu flying. Not far away, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord, Jing Feihong, and more than 20 divine lords revealed looks of pleasant surprise as they cheered and shouted. All hail the divine envoy. As expected of the divine envoy who patrols vast heaven and upholds justice. He's just too powerful. With the divine envoy here, those 3 bastards will definitely be executed. Not only were the 2 domain lords and many divine lords excited, they regained their confidence and anticipation. Even the thousands of god monarchs who were watching the battle in secret from 10,000 miles away were discussing animatedly. Their spirits were high. At this point, they had already figured out the identities of the people present through their observation and eavesdropping. The arrival of the two domain lords had already shocked and excited them. The existence of divine envoy Vast Heaven was something many divine lords had never heard of. They were even more excited. In the eyes of many divine lords, divine envoy Vast Heaven was above the domain lords. He was a lofty and rarely seen noble figure. Now, divine envoy Vast Heaven had personally come to the Golden Dragon Abyss to uphold justice for the Golden Dragon domain. They were extremely lucky to be able to witness this scene with their own eyes. Therefore, when they saw divine envoy Vast Heaven display his might and defeat Ji Tianqing and company in one strike, countless divine lords cheered and shouted. Everyone's cheers and flattery, as well as countless passionate and worshipful gazes, made Divine King's stellar aspect very happy and satisfied. This was the feeling he wanted. While he was on cloud 9, his confidence also multiplied and he was in high spirits. He was in no hurry to pursue Ji Tianqing and company. He looked down at them from above and shouted proudly, "Brat, do you now understand the difference between you and me? Arrogance and conceit are useless. Being executed is your only way out. Surrender obediently, and I can give you a dignified death." In the sky 50 kilometers away, Ji Tianqing raised his sleeve to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth as he silently circulated his energy to suppress his internal injuries. Yang and Chao Qingyu stood behind him as they circulated their energy to suppress their injuries. They glared at Divine King's stellar aspect with resentful eyes. "Young master, how are your injuries? Are you all right? Master, what do we do now? Do we continue fighting him?" Both of them looked at Ji Tianqing, waiting for him to make a decision. Yang came from the Chaos Continent and had no sense of belonging to the Boundless Heaven Continent, nor did he revere it. Therefore, he did not care about the other party's identity. Chao Qingyu was a citizen of the Boundless Heaven Continent and should revere and obey the orders of Divine Envoy Vast Heaven. However, he had left Vast Heaven for nearly 10,000 years. He did not have any concept of reverence for Divine Envoy Vast Heaven and the Azura God Emperor. Therefore, he did not think of submitting. He only listened to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment before sending a voice transmission. "It's not convenient for us to fight here. There are several divine arrays set up around the deep abyss that have not been activated for the time being. I believe that they are trump cards they left behind to deal us a fatal blow at the critical moment. Furthermore, there are dozens of factions and thousands of divine lords watching the battle from afar. If Divine Envoy Vast Heaven and the Golden Dragon Domain Lord are forced into a corner and order those divine lords to join the battle, we will truly be unable to escape. Therefore, we have to leave this place first and shake off those divine lords before continuing the slaughter." Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3404. Chao Qingyu and Yang naturally approved of Ji Tianqing's decision. Furthermore, what he said was the truth, which was also what they were most worried about. No one had any objections and immediately turned to flee. The trio was more than 300 kilometers away from the edge of the abyss entrance. Under normal circumstances, they could teleport 500 kilometers away from the abyss entrance. But, in the battle just now, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong had secretly activated a massive array. It was a sealing formation that released a formless divine power that enveloped an area of 1,000 miles, sealing off this space. The reason for doing so was to prevent Ji Tianqing and company from escaping. Therefore, it was impossible for him to teleport away. They could only turn and fly away, charging through the invisible sealing array. Swish! Divine light flashed as Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and Yang turned at the same time and charged toward the edge of the abyss entrance at their fastest speed. They were like bolts of lightning that tore through the sky, erupting with peerlessly sharp auras. Upon seeing this, God King's stellar aspect, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord, and Jing Feihong were stunned. They clearly did not expect that Ji Tianqing and company would suddenly turn and flee when they were brimming with confidence earlier. Even if God King's stellar aspect attacked and injured them in one move, there was no need for them to be so frightened, right? While God King's stellar aspect and company were still in a daze, Ji Tianqing and company had already flown more than 150 kilometers, crossing half the distance. God King's stellar aspect was the first to react as he hurriedly ordered, "Stop them. Activate the array. We can't let them escape." Upon hearing the order, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong snapped out of their daze and hurriedly cast their arts to activate another divine array. This was a powerful killing array that could release 108,000 sharp blades of divine light that drowned the target like a torrential rain, destroying everything. However, the array was previously invisible, so it would take some time to activate it suddenly. At the very least, they would not be able to make it in time before Ji Tianqing and company escaped. The Golden Dragon Region's Domain Master and Jing Feihong were sweating profusely, but there was nothing they could do. The moment Godly King's stellar aspect saw the turn of events, he knew that he would not be able to stop them in time. Without any hesitation, he powered the 8 bronze spears to attack Ji Tianqing and company. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! The divine spear pierced through the air like an aurora, instantly traversing 500 miles and catching up to Ji Tianqing and the other two. Every single spear emitted a dazzling light. Carrying an unparalleled murderous intent, they pierced towards the vital points of the three people. Suddenly, Ji Tianqing and the other two fell into a dilemma. If they continued to run forward and ignored the 8 divine spears, they would definitely be pierced by the divine spears and suffer heavy injuries. If they were to cast spells to block and intercept the 8 divine spears, they would have to stop. Even if they didn't stop, their speed would be slowed down and they would be delayed. In that case, the Golden Dragon Domain Master and Jing Feihong would have enough time to activate the invisible killing formation. At that time, the 2 divine formations would operate at the same time, which would definitely bring them great pressure. No matter how capable they were, it would take them a very long time to crack the 2 monarch-level divine formations. It was likely that Godly King's stellar aspect would lead his group to surround them before they could crack the 2 arrays. They would still be surrounded and unable to escape danger. Furthermore, their situation would only become more perilous. At this critical juncture, Chao Qingyu and Yank were filled with anxiety, unsure of what to do. Only Ji Tianqing was as calm as usual, and he was already prepared. He instantly conjured the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda and sucked Yank and Chao Qingyu into it. Swish! With a white flash, Yank and Chao Qingyu vanished. Only Ji Tianqing was still running, and his speed had increased by a few notches. The 8 divine spears adjusted their direction slightly and locked onto him as they sped up. At that moment, Ji Tianqing conjured the burial of heaven and used a technique that he had not used in a long time. Man sword as one. Swish! With a dazzling golden flash, Ji Tianqing's figure also vanished. He fused with the burial of heaven, becoming a 10,000-foot-long divine sword that shone with resplendent golden light. The 300 seals on the burial of heaven were all activated. The 300 divine Tao laws were also activated at the same time, raising its strength to the limit. In addition to Ji Tianqing's strength augmentation, the burial of heaven's strength doubled. The gigantic sword was like a blinding sun as it tore through the sky at the speed of light. It instantly shook off the 8 ancient bronze divine spears and ruthlessly slammed into the invisible sealing array. The next instant, the gigantic divine sword stabbed into the invisible sealing light wall, producing a loud boom that shook the 9 heavens. Boom! The loud boom shook the heavens, spreading for thousands of kilometers. Resplendent golden light bloomed, producing tens of thousands of divine light fragments that scattered in all directions. In the seemingly empty sky, a huge vortex also burst out, causing ripples that resembled stormy waves. Without a doubt, the invisible sealing array had been blasted open. A huge hole had been blasted open in the invisible sealing light wall, and dense cracks had appeared on it. Although the 10,000-foot-long golden sword also had many cracks, and countless divine light fragments were scattered. Those were only sword radiances, not the actual body of the Burial of Heaven. The Burial of Heaven was a mid-king level divine artifact, and it was already very powerful. Furthermore, it had fused with Ji Tianqing, so its strength was even more terrifying. It was reasonable that it could break open a mid-king level sealing array. Swish! After escaping the sealing array, the gigantic golden sword did not slow down at all. It continued to fly south. At this moment, the Golden Dragon Domain Ruler and Jing Feihong activated the second invisible killing array. A 5-colored light screen with a radius of 1,000 miles appeared, enveloping the entire entrance to the abyss and releasing 108,000 sharp blades of divine light. Terrifying killing intent and divine power poured down from the screen of light, covering 1,000 miles of the sky. However, all of this was too late. The Golden Dragon Domain Ruler and Jing Feihong were dumbfounded. They were shocked and resentful as they muttered indignantly, "Damn it! We actually let them escape. How could this be? That sealing divine array was personally set up by Sir Divine Envoy." Originally, Jing Feihong wanted to express that the sealing array set up by Godly King Stellar Aspect was very powerful, and that Ji Tianqing definitely could not break through it. However, Godly King Stellar Aspect's face darkened when he heard that. He glared coldly at Jing Feihong. Clearly, Godly King Stellar Aspect had not expected Ji Tianqing to be able to break through the divine array he had set up and so easily escape the encirclement. He was shocked, but Jing Feihong had said it in front of everyone. He had lost face, so he was naturally resentful. "What are you waiting for? Why aren't you chasing after them?" Seeing the Golden Dragon Domain Ruler and Jing Feihong's vexation, Godly King Stellar Aspect bellowed coldly. With that said, he took the lead and flew through the abyss entrance. Riding on the 8 divine spears, he charged south as fast as lightning. The 8 divine spears were arranged in 2 rows under his feet. They carried him as fast as a stream of light. The Golden Dragon Domain Ruler and Jing Feihong were taken aback for a moment before regaining their senses. They hurriedly chased south. The 20-odd high-ranked divine lords hesitated for a moment, but they could only bite the bullet and follow. Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3405. Whoosh! High in the sky, above the white sea of clouds, a golden sword beam streaked past. This 10,000-foot-long golden sword beam was the sword of Burial of Heaven that had fused with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had long forgotten how many years it had been since he had fused with the sword of Burial of Heaven to fight an enemy. After all, the enemies he had encountered in the past were not strong enough, and the situation was not dangerous enough. With his own strength and means, he could usually resolve them. In addition, the sword of Burial of Heaven's grade had not increased, so it was not very powerful. Even after fusing with the sword of Burial of Heaven, it did not improve by much. But it was different now. The sword of Burial of Heaven went from a Supreme Monarch Divine Artifact to a Medial Monarch Divine Artifact. A divine artifact of this grade was rare in the divine world. It was enough to deal with most dangerous situations. Ji Tianqing's fusion with the sword of Burial of Heaven was like adding wings to a tiger. The facts proved that this was indeed the case. Even the sealing divine array personally set up by Godly King Stellar Aspect had been destroyed by the sword of Burial of Heaven. Ji Tianqing was even more confident in defeating Godly King Stellar Aspect. Even though he had already fled the abyss entrance and was nearly 5,000 kilometers south, he did not slow down. However, he did not slow down, nor did he remove the fusion with the Heaven Burial sword. 5,000 kilometers was still too short. Godly King Stellar Aspect would soon catch up. Once he was held back by Godly King Stellar Aspect, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord, Jing Feihong, and the other divine lords would immediately follow. Ji Tianqing had long planned to stay at least 50,000 kilometers away from the abyss entrance. He would wait for godly King Stellar Aspect and the Golden Dragon Domain Lord to open up some distance before stopping to fight. In short, it was to try not to be surrounded. It was best to split up and defeat them one by one. 500 kilometers behind the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Godly King Stellar Aspect was standing on 8 divine spears as he sped forward like a stream of light. No matter how fast the Burial of Heaven's sword was, he used all his strength and clenched his teeth to keep up with it. He didn't let the distance between them widen. His expression was as gloomy as ice. He stared coldly at the Sword of Burial of Heaven and muttered to himself, "Despicable little bastard." Today, not only are there 2 domain lords, there are also a few thousand monarchs staring at this king. Everyone is full of reverence and fanaticism towards this king. If I let you escape from under my nose, wouldn't I be criticized and laughed at in secret for many years? At that time, not only will I be too ashamed to face anyone, even His Highness the God Emperor will lose face. Don't even think about escaping from the palm of my hand. Even if I have to chase you to the end of the continent, to the shore of the heavenly sea, I will still kill you. Just as he said that, God King Stellar Aspect discovered that the Burial of Heaven had sped up again. Therefore, he could only explode with even more divine power and increase his speed by a little bit while gnashing his teeth. Even though accelerating like this would consume his divine power rapidly, and he would be completely drained in 2 or 3 days at most. However, he could not relax. He could only speed up again and again. This was because he believed that Ji Tianqing would not be much better off if his divine power was being rapidly drained. In terms of strength, Ji Tianqing would definitely not be his match. About 400 kilometers behind God King Stellar Aspect, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong were flying side by side, following closely behind. The 2 were filled with vexation and resentment, and their expressions were somewhat bitter. After all, the 2 of them had been severely injured by Ji Tianqing, missing an arm or a leg. Not only had their strength decreased by 30 to 40%, but their bodies were also suffering immense pain. Furthermore, they did not have the time to recuperate. They could only rely on their divine power to suppress their injuries. Yet, Ji Tianqing had escaped, and God King Stellar Aspect was chasing after him with all his might. They could not possibly stay where they were and wait for God King Stellar Aspect's report of victory. They could only endure the pain and unleash their divine power at all costs to barely keep up with God King Stellar Aspect's footsteps. Even so, with the passage of time, they were left further and further behind. However, no matter how far they were left behind, they had to follow as usual. This was a matter of attitude, and also a show for God King Stellar Aspect. Otherwise, God King Stellar Aspect would help them take revenge and pursue Ji Tianqing with all his might while they waited for the outcome. They would definitely offend God King Stellar Aspect, and their future days would definitely be difficult. At this moment, the 2 of them could only pray in their hearts, hoping that God King Stellar Aspect would catch up to Ji Tianqing as soon as possible. As long as God King Stellar Aspect held back Ji Tianqing, they would be able to arrive in time. The 20 or so upper deity lords who had survived were the pillars of the Cloud region and the Golden Dragon region. They had come on the orders of the 2 domain lords to surround and ambush Ji Tianqing. In the present situation, with God King Stellar Aspect and the 2 domain lords pursuing Ji Tianqing, they could only follow. Even if they were left far behind, more than 1,000 kilometers away from the 2 domain lords, they could not stop. After all, anyone who did not follow would be defying the 2 domain lords' orders. However, they were only divine lords. Even if they tried their best, it was impossible for them to keep up with the God Kings. They were destined to be left behind. In the first 15 minutes, they were still able to maintain a distance of 20,000 kilometers from the 2 domain lords. They could use their divine senses to detect them. 30 minutes later, they had been left behind 40,000 kilometers, and the 2 domain lords were nowhere to be seen. Even using their divine senses to investigate was useless. They had lost track of their pursuers on the spot. However, they could only grit their teeth and continue heading south. Besides, behind the 20-odd divine lords, about 20,000 kilometers away, there were 20-odd divine warships following. Each divine warship represented a faction, and there were dozens of divine lords on board. Previously, when the three god kings attacked Ji Tianqing, they had hidden 30,000 kilometers away to watch the battle. Through watching the battle, they understood the identities of God King Stellar Aspect, the two domain lords, and Ji Tianqing. Later, when they saw Ji Tianqing and company flee, God King Stellar Aspect began his pursuit. The 40-odd factions also fell into hesitation. Many busybodies followed on their divine warships. Firstly, they wanted to watch the excitement. They did not want to miss the once-in-a-lifetime battle between god kings. Secondly, they wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to perform in front of the domain lords and divine envoys. If they were lucky enough to catch the eye of the domain lords and divine envoys, they would be promoted and rewarded. Even if they were not appreciated, they would be extremely lucky to be able to watch a battle between god kings with their own eyes. Therefore, more than 20 factions drove their divine warships to the south at their fastest speed. However, there were also 20-odd factions that acted more conservatively and calmly. They knew that they could not catch up to the god kings, nor were they qualified to participate in a battle between god kings. Therefore, they decided not to join in the fun. As for the final outcome of the battle, they did not need to watch the battle. They would know sooner or later. This was because this matter would definitely cause a stir in the Golden Dragon region and spread to the surrounding regions. It would be known by all the gods in the world. Furthermore, to the divine lords of these factions, there was no suspense to the outcome of the battle. No matter how strong the three god kings were or how brilliant their methods were, it was useless. In the boundless heaven continent, no one could defeat the divine envoy of God Emperor, much less challenge the rules and authority of His Majesty. Chapter 3406. At that moment, the sun was setting in the west. It had been 2 hours since Ji Tianqing escaped from the abyss entrance. During this time, he had fused with the sword of burial of heaven and continuously flew 500,000 kilometers. If he did not count the continuous teleportation, this was already his fastest speed. This was despite the fact that flying at such a high intensity would greatly drain his divine power. However, his flight this time was mainly powered by the sword of burial of heaven, with him assisting from the side. With his current strength, coupled with the sword of burial of heaven, he could last 10 days and nights without rest before his divine power ran dry. It was just 2 hours, so it did not affect his combat strength much. At that moment, he was flying over a vast mountain range. He was surrounded by endless mountain peaks and valleys. This place is a mountain range with a radius of 200,000 kilometers. It's desolate and uninhabited, perfect for a battle. I've already flown nearly 500,000 kilometers. With the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong speed, they should be tens of thousands of kilometers behind. As for those divine lords, they should be at least 200,000 kilometers behind. They won't be able to catch up in another 2 hours. Then let's settle it here. With this thought flashing through his mind, Ji Tianqing stopped the burial of heaven and removed the fusion with the burial of heaven. Swish! He appeared in the sky, holding the sword of burial of heaven that had returned to its original state. He turned around and looked behind him. He saw God King Stellar Aspect riding 8 divine spears in the sky 500 kilometers to the north as he sped over like a stream of light. After flying for an hour, God King Stellar Aspect did not feel tired at all. At the same time, he continued to follow Ji Tianqing closely without being shaken off. During the pursuit, he had been left more than 500 kilometers behind several times. However, he would always use teleportation in time to instantly close the distance. He had already made plans to pursue Ji Tianqing for a long period of time. He was also prepared to compete in endurance with Ji Tianqing. He had long predicted that in about 3 days, Ji Tianqing's strength would weaken, allowing him to catch up. However, he never expected that Ji Tianqing would stop above the mountain range. Upon seeing this, God King's stellar aspect was overjoyed, but he also became even more vigilant and wary. Damned little bastard, why did you suddenly stop? Could it be that he had run out of energy and knew that he couldn't escape? No. Looking at his calm and composed appearance, it didn't seem like he was lacking in strength. Could it be that he had reinforcements and had set up an ambush here in advance to lure me here? That's possible. I have to be careful. With this in mind, Godly King's stellar aspect slowed down and stopped 50 kilometers away from Ji Tianqing. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing as he released his divine sense, performed his divine sense, and used his divine sense to check if there were any traps or ambushes around. Seeing him so cautious, Ji Tianqing could not help sneering and mocking, ha ha ha. Even the oracle of Haotian is scared out of his wits and becomes so cautious. Didn't you say that the boundless heaven continent was the territory of the Azura God Emperor, and that it was all within your jurisdiction? Why? Are you afraid that I have reinforcements and will ambush you here? Having his thoughts exposed, Godly King's stellar aspect's face turned red and he was furious. He glared at Ji Tianqing and retaliated, not to be outdone. Kid, you're not from the Golden Dragon region and have no foundation here. What are you going to use to ambush me? Besides, is this king someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry can ambush me? I think this mountain range is not bad. It's desolate and uninhabited. It's suitable for you to be buried here. Ji Tianqing laughed even more mockingly as he waved his hand. It was clearly me who chose this place to be your burial ground. It looks like you're quite satisfied. Humph. Shameless boasting. Godly King's stellar aspect snorted and sneered disdainfully. In my opinion, it's clearly your lack of strength. You know that you can't escape from me, so you might as well stop and accept your death. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate. Ji Tianqing did not take the initiative to attack, so Godly King's stellar aspect was in no hurry to attack. He was delaying because he knew that the Golden Dragon Region Lord and Jing Feihong were definitely following behind and would catch up in a while. Ji Tianqing naturally thought of the problem that Godly King's stellar aspect could think of as well. He raised his eyebrows and sneered with a playful tone. It looks like you're still a coward. You were shouting to kill me in an aggressive manner, but now, you're deliberately delaying for time and waiting for reinforcements to arrive. I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. Since you're in hot pursuit, die. With that said, Ji Tianqing formed a sword seal with his left hand and held the burial of heaven with his right hand. He pointed at the firmament and shouted coldly, "Sword rain." As his voice sounded, 28,000 silver specks of starlight lit up in the originally calm firmament. Every speck of starlight was a 20,000-foot-long astral sword that contained vast and mighty astral divine power. Whoosh! 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 More than 20,000 astral swords rained down from the firmament like meteors, enveloping a radius of 2,500 kilometers. Before the sword flashes arrived, a formless divine might that suppressed the world had already enveloped the area. Godly King's stellar aspect endured immense pressure, but his expression did not change. His body was as straight as a spear, and his eyes remained sharp. Punk, how can this king let you live any longer if you're in such a hurry to die? As he spoke, Godly King's stellar aspect formed a divine seal with both hands. He conjured the 8 ancient bronze divine spears and stabbed them at Ji Tianqing. As for the sword rain that rained down from the sky, he temporarily ignored it. This was because he wanted to interrupt Ji Tianqing's casting before the sword rain descended and the sword array formed. If he could take the opportunity to heavily injure Ji Tianqing, that would naturally be for the best. However, Godly King's stellar aspect had underestimated Ji Tianqing and made the wrong judgment. Ordinary godly monarchs had to continue casting their spells without any distractions when using a divine power like the heaven-vanquishing sword array. Against the 8 divine spears, they could only choose to cancel their casting and defend with all their might. However, Ji Tianqing was different. After summoning more than 20,000 divine swords from outer space, he could ignore them. The 28,000 astral swords would continue descending and automatically form the heaven-vanquishing sword array. The 8 divine spears stabbed at Ji Tianqing from different directions, aiming straight for his vitals. Ji Tianqing let out a low roar and used his ultimate divine ability. Absolute Shadows of the 10 Directions. Immediately, his body lit up with resplendent white light as his figure turned blurry. The next instant, white light flashed as his true body vanished. And in the sky, there were actually 3 Ji Tianxings. All of them had white robes, black hair, black eyes, and black swords. Be it appearance, eyes, or bearing, there was no difference. Without a doubt. This was Absolute Shadow Avatar. The last time Ji Tianqing used Absolute Shadow Avatar, he was only at the first firmament godly monarch realm. He could only conjure one avatar. But now, he had broken through to the second firmament godly monarch realm, so the number of avatars he had increased to 2. Together with his true body, there were naturally 3 of him. Godly King's stellar aspect was immediately stunned as he glared angrily. He could not help but exclaim, "Phantom!" Or Avatar. He was a middle-level godly monarch and also a supreme heaven divine envoy. He was naturally knowledgeable. Although he did not cultivate in avatar arts, he had seen them before. He had also exchanged blows with godly monarchs who had grasped avatar arts. Chapter 3407. With Godly King's stellar aspects experience, there were 2 possibilities for the situation before him. Either Ji Tianqing had used an illusion art to hide his true body, leaving behind 3 illusions to confuse him. Or he had used an avatar art to create 2 avatars to assist him in battle. But be it the illusion art or the avatar art, they left Godly King's stellar aspect stunned for a moment. He was momentarily unable to find a target. The 8 divine spears also paused for a moment, unsure of which target to attack. Thankfully, Godly King's stellar aspect was experienced and had the 3-eyed blood pupil. The blood pupil on his forehead suddenly opened as it emitted a dark red divine light. He instantly made a judgment. It was an avatar art, not an illusion. However, the 3 Ji Tianqing were identical. Which one was the true body and which 2 were the avatars? Time was of the essence. Godly King's stellar aspect did not have the time to use his blood pupil mystic art to carefully distinguish between the avatars and the true body. He controlled the 8 ancient bronze divine spears to attack the 3 Ji Tianqing. The 2 figures on the left and right were locked onto by 2 divine spears. The figure in the middle withstood the attacks of 3 divine spears. Whoosh! 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 Sharp sonic booms sounded as the 8 ancient bronze divine spears emitted divine light once again as they sped up. However, the 3 Ji Tianqing remained calm and composed. They brandished the burial of heaven at the same time, slashing out sword flashes that filled the sky. Bam! 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 The resplendent sword flashes that blotted out the sky happened to block the 8 ancient bronze divine spears. The intense collision produced a dull boom. The sword flashes shattered as divine light fragments filled the sky. The ancient bronze spears were also sent flying back in front of Godly King's stellar aspect. Even though Godly King's stellar aspect's attack had been neutralized and failed to achieve any results, it was not as if he had gained nothing. At the very least, the reactions of the 3 Ji Tianqing allowed him to distinguish between the true body and the true body. The 2 Ji Tianqing on the left and right were sent flying back 10,000 feet. Their breathing was somewhat hurried, and their divine powers were clearly lacking. As for the figure in the middle, he was only sent flying back about 2,000 feet. His expression remained indifferent, and his aura remained sharp. Godly King's stellar aspect immediately understood that the figure in the middle was Ji Tianqing's true body. The figures on the left and right were two clones. Furthermore, the strength of the doppelganger was far inferior to the strength of the main body. It was only about half of the original strength. Humph. Do you think you can fool me with a mere body separation technique? Godly King's stellar aspect snorted coldly in disdain. He was just about to control the ancient bronze divine spear to attack Ji Tianqing's true body with all his might. However, at this moment, the 28,000 star swords suddenly descended, covering a radius of 5,000 miles. Swoosh! Swish swish swish! Dazzling sword light flashed as tens of thousands of starry swords flew back and forth, forming a huge sword formation between heaven and earth. In just one breath's time, a sword formation with a radius of 5,000 miles appeared. It was like a heavenly curtain covering the mountains and the earth, sealing off this area. The other 18,000 gigantic swords rapidly danced in the sword array, forming dozens of blade tornadoes and more than 20 sword nets. They began their assault on Godly King's stellar aspect. Swoosh! Swish swish swish! As danger approached, numerous blade tornadoes and sword nets surged at Godly King's stellar aspect from every direction, immediately drowning his figure. Godly King's stellar aspect could not be bothered with attacking Ji Tianqing. All he could do was cast his spells to fend off the tornadoes and sword nets. Heaven slaying 8 extremities. Oblique blade across the sky. Godly King's stellar aspect wielded an ancient bronze divine spear in each hand as he used his ultimate divine power. He brandished spear flashes that blotted out the sky, destroying the tornadoes and sword nets one by one. At the same time, he was multitasking. He used his mind to control the other 6 ancient bronze divine spears to form a gigantic defensive net to protect himself. Even if he was engulfed by the blade tornadoes and attacked by thousands of gigantic swords, he could still use the ancient bronze divine spears to protect himself. While using all his strength to fend off the sword nets and tornadoes, he could also brandish his divine spears to launch a counterattack. However, he was already trapped by the heaven-vanquishing sword formation. He could not escape, nor did he have the extra strength to attack Ji Tianqing. As Ji Tianqing controlled the heaven-vanquishing sword formation to unleash an even stronger might to attack Godly King's stellar aspect, he also brandished the burial of heaven to launch a ferocious assault. The situation on the battlefield changed. Ji Tianqing actually gained the upper hand and suppressed Godly King's stellar aspect. Right on the heels of that, Ji Tianqing opened the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda. Swish! 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 3 divine beams of light flashed as Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Lan appeared. The 3 of them gave it their all as they cast all sorts of divine powers and ultimate skills to besiege Godly King's stellar aspect. If not for Ji Tianqing, none of them would be Godly King's stellar aspect's match. In a one-on-one battle, they would be slain in less than 100 moves. But things were different now. With Ji Tianqing at the front, he suppressed Godly King's stellar aspect with all his strength, preventing him from retaliating. The 3 of them had no qualms as they unleashed their attacks to their heart's content, besieging Godly King's stellar aspect with all their might. Godly King's stellar aspect's situation was even more precarious. Before long, he was struck by the sword net. Several wounds appeared on his body as blood splattered out. He was filled with rage, but there was nothing he could do. All he could do was defend with all his might. But even so, he was still lacking in strength. There were gaps in his defenses as the wounds on his body continued to increase. Yet, Ji Tianqing, Yank, Chao Qingyu, and company were sneering mockingly as they constantly mocked him. As the mighty divine envoy of vast heaven, when had he ever been so aggrieved? He was so angry that his lungs were about to explode as he constantly roared and cursed. But the more he acted this way, the more pleased Ji Tianqing, Chao Qingyu, and company became. They engaged in a war of words with him, infuriating him. Another 30 minutes passed as Godly King Stellar Aspect's injuries worsened. He had suffered at least 30 sword wounds all over his body. The wounds were hideous and terrifying, deep enough to reveal his bones. Blood constantly flowed out, dyeing his armor red. Godly King Stellar Aspect was completely helpless. He knew that if this continued, his injuries would only worsen. Even if he did not die, he would suffer the pain of being dismembered. Therefore, he no longer counterattacked. He focused all his attention on controlling the 8 ancient bronze divine spears to form an impenetrable defensive barrier. Furthermore, he used his divine power to activate his king-level divine armor, enveloping his entire body like a metal giant. He defended with all his might, hoping to avoid being injured and preserve his strength as much as possible. He had to wait, patiently wait for the Golden Dragon Domain Lord, Jing Feihong, and the numerous Divine Lord experts. Once everyone arrived, they would attack from outside the heaven-vanquishing sword array. When that happened, he would launch a pincer attack with the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and company. Only then would they have a chance of cracking the heaven-vanquishing sword array and regaining the initiative. However, the moment Godly King Stellar Aspect made the change, Ji Tianqing saw through his intentions and guessed his thoughts. Ji Tianqing also adjusted his strategy in time, no longer diverting his attention to controlling the heaven-vanquishing sword array. He gripped the Burial of Heaven tightly with both hands and used his divine power, releasing his strongest attack. Celestial Dragon Tyrant Body. Ji Tianqing roared angrily as his body emitted a dazzling golden light. He immediately transformed into a giant golden armored god 10,000 feet tall. Spacetime Blade. He roared again as he gripped the Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed at Godly King Stellar Aspect, slashing out a blazing white greatsword that was 10,000 feet long. Chapter 3408. The 100,000-foot-long spacetime blade contained vast and mighty time and space divine powers. When this massive sword was used by the Sword of Burial of Heaven, its might was even more terrifying. Even though Godly King Stellar Aspect was enveloped in armor and protected by the barrier of light formed by the 8 divine spears, he still felt immense danger. But now that things had developed to this point, he guessed that Ji Tianqing's all-out attack was to force him to counterattack and take the opportunity to injure him. Therefore, he could only deal with the situation by maintaining the status quo and raising his defensive strength to the limit. The next instant, the spacetime blade descended and cleaved at the defensive barrier formed by the 8 divine spears. Boom! With a crisp shattering sound, the 1,000-foot-wide barrier was cleaved in half on the spot, shattering into fragments that filled the sky. The 8 divine spears also swayed from the impact, with a few of them being sent flying. However, the spacetime blade's strength did not weaken much. Its might was still terrifying. A tenth of an instant later, the spacetime blade tore through the divine light fragments and struck Godly King Stellar Aspect. Bam! Another deafening boom reverberated through the sky. Godly King Stellar Aspect was sent flying as he tumbled 500 kilometers away. The bronze armor he wore was originally a medial-grade king-level divine artifact with extremely powerful defensive strength. However, after being struck by the spacetime blade, a fissure split open, revealing a deep indentation. The indentation happened to be on Godly King Stellar Aspect's right shoulder. Large amounts of dark red blood seeped out from the fissure in the armor. Without a doubt, Godly King Stellar Aspect's right shoulder was severely injured. His scapula fractured on the spot, his meridians and bone marrow shattered. The excruciating pain caused his face to turn pale. He could not help but grunt as he felt infuriated. Only after flying 500 kilometers away did he manage to dissipate the terrifying impact and stabilize his body. He lowered his head to look at his right shoulder and discovered that it had clearly collapsed. His entire right arm swayed weakly. For the time being, this arm was crippled. He could no longer wield a divine spear to attack. Godly King Stellar Aspect's expression was as cold as ice. His eyes flickered with a cold, venomous light. He silently circulated his energy to suppress his injuries and glared angrily at Ji Tianqing in the distance. He shouted angrily, "Little bastard, are you determined to kill me and swear to go against His Highness the God Emperor? It's not too late for you to stop now. Don't make any more mistakes and be consigned to eternal damnation." Godly King Stellar Aspect knew that his identity as Divine Envoy Ji Tianqing and his strength at the Sixth Firmament Divine Monarch realm was no longer enough to suppress him. If he wanted to stall for time and deter Ji Tianqing, he could only use the name of the Azura God Emperor. However, Ji Tianqing and the others turned a deaf ear to his words and continued to attack fiercely. Stellar Aspect was infuriated, but there was nothing he could do. All he could do was shrink his defenses like a turtle and defend with all his might. It was a pity that his right arm was crippled, and his divine power had weakened significantly. Naturally, his defense had dropped. It was no doubt a fool's dream if he wanted to defend against Ji Tianqing and company's encirclement. The heaven-vanquishing sword array continued to circulate as dozens of blade tornadoes and sword nets bombarded him constantly. Ji Tianqing also constantly used his secret techniques as he attacked Stellar Aspect again and again. God-vanquishing sword. Burial of heaven. Heaven-piercing sword. Sword cleaving the 9 heavens. Sword of Apocalypse. Every sword Tao divine power released an extremely terrifying might. After it struck Godly King Stellar Aspect, it produced loud cracking sounds. The 8 divine spears danced rapidly as they constantly formed defensive shields, but they were shattered by Ji Tianqing time and time again. After 9 consecutive attacks, 2 divine spears were shattered on the spot. Naturally, every time the defensive shield was breached, Godly King Stellar Aspect's injuries would worsen. The bronze armor he wore was no longer in perfect condition. Cracks and gaps began to appear on it. Blood constantly spewed out from every crack and gap. Stellar Aspect was in an increasingly wretched state as his strength constantly weakened. However, he was unable to break out of the encirclement. All he could do was pray silently, hoping that the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong would arrive as soon as possible. Perhaps the heavens had heard his prayers, or perhaps the 2 Domain Lords did not dare to tarry and used all their strength to rush over. After another quarter of an hour, 2 beams of divine light appeared in the northern sky. Swoosh! Swoosh! The 2 divine lights were as fast as meteors as they quickly approached. When they were 100 kilometers away from the heaven-vanquishing sword array, the 2 divine lights stopped. When the divine lights faded, 2 figures with disheveled hair and bloodstains appeared. Without a doubt, they were the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong. The 2 of them had no time to recuperate. They were panting anxiously as they chased after them. Their wounds were still bleeding. Upon seeing the gigantic heaven-vanquishing sword array in front of them, which was emitting a dazzling divine light that illuminated the sky, the 2 revealed grave expressions. It should be here. They must have been fighting for a long time before we managed to catch up. That's right. This sword array is so vast and majestic, and it's also a king-grade divine array. It's most likely Lord Divine Envoy's ultimate skill, right? The 2 of them stared at the heaven-vanquishing sword array and did not dare to act rashly. They observed carefully first. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord frowned and shook his head gently. Probably not. If it's Lord Divine Envoy's sword array, it will definitely suppress Tianqing and his companions. Lord Divine Envoy should be outside the array. Do you mean? Jing Feihong frowned and revealed a worried expression. This is that bastard Tianqing's sword array. He used this sword array to suppress Lord Divine Envoy and is attacking Lord Divine Envoy with his companions. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord nodded and said in a low voice, "That's possible. Don't panic, we should calm down. We will know the result after shouting a few times. Therefore, He and Jing Feihong bowed to the heaven-vanquishing sword array and shouted hurriedly and respectfully, "Lord Divine Envoy, we came late to rescue you. Please forgive us." No matter what, the two of them had to be respectful in front of Lord Divine Envoy. They could not be lacking in etiquette. However, their shouts echoed in the sky for a long time without receiving a response. Did our voices not reach the sword array? Or perhaps Lord Divine Envoy is fighting with all his might and did not hear our voices? Let's try again. We have to use the divine roar technique this time. The two of them exchanged looks and exchanged a few words before using the divine roar technique to shout again. There was still no response this time. The two of them turned even more anxious and tried 3 more times. Just as their hearts sank and they mistakenly believed that Godly King Stellar Aspect had encountered a mishap, Godly King Stellar Aspect's voice came from the sword array. "It's good that the both of you can follow. You did not disappoint this king. Don't just stand there. Quickly attack this sword array and coordinate with this king. Destroy it in one fell swoop." Godly King Stellar Aspect's voice was low and hoarse. It was muffled by the whistling of the sword flashes, making it somewhat unclear. However, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong still understood what Godly King Stellar Aspect meant. The two of them immediately felt energized and clearly heaved a sigh of relief. Phew! Thankfully, Lord Divine Envoy is fine. It looks like we guessed right. This sword array was indeed cast by that bastard Tianqing. Lord Divine Envoy has been trapped. Don't just stand there. Let's quickly cast our spells to attack this sword array. Chapter 3409. As long as Stellar Aspect was still alive and fighting, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong still had hope of revenge. The two of them were surprised that Godly King Stellar Aspect had been trapped by Ji Tianqing's sword array. From the present situation, Stellar Aspect did not seem to be as strong as they had imagined. His situation did not look optimistic either. However, the Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong continued attacking the heaven-vanquishing sword array with all their might in a futile attempt to save Stellar Aspect. Crimson Flame Dragon Slaying Slash. Ardent Wind Soaring Sky Strike. 9 Lightning Dharma Breaker. Frost Blood Roar Sky Cleave. The two ignored their injuries as they unleashed their greatest strength, taking turns to use all sorts of divine powers. Saber flashes and sword shadows blotted out the sky as dazzling divine power brilliance attacked the heaven-vanquishing sword array. Bam! 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 Rumble. Accompanied by a deafening explosion, the heaven-destroying sword formation was shaken by the explosion, and the Abhijna light was shattered. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong's attacks failed to break through the heaven-vanquishing sword array's barrier of light. However, the heaven-vanquishing sword array's operations were affected to a certain extent. Not only did the sword array's operations slow down, but its might was also scattered. Before this, the heaven-vanquishing sword array only needed to suppress Stellar Aspect and kill him with all its might. But now, it was different. The sword array needed to divert a portion of its strength to strengthen the sword array's barrier of light. Originally, more than 10,000 stellar swords formed the barrier of light and 18,000 swords attacked Stellar Aspect. Now, half of the swords formed the barrier of light while the other half continued to attack Stellar Aspect. The Golden Dragon Domain Lord and Jing Feihong were injured and did not have much combat strength. However, they were still mid-level godly monarchs. Their strength was not to be underestimated. If they were allowed to attack the sword array, it was only a matter of time before the two of them broke through the heaven-vanquishing sword array. Stellar Aspect, who was trapped in the sword array, immediately felt the pressure lessen significantly. He thought to himself, although those two fools are weak, they are still loyal. They do not dare to be negligent. As long as they continue attacking the sword array, this king will be safe. Once those divine lords arrive and join forces with those two fools to attack the sword array, this king will have a chance of escaping. Now that things had developed to this point, godly King Stellar Aspect felt somewhat regretful. If he had known that Ji Tianqing would be so difficult to deal with, he wouldn't have agreed to the Golden Dragon Realm ruler and Jing Feihong's request so easily. Moreover, he would not underestimate his enemy and allow Ji Tianqing to escape from the entrance of the abyss. Most importantly, when Ji Tianqing used the heaven-destroying sword formation, he would definitely not underestimate it. He would definitely retreat immediately. However, it was too late to say anything now. All he could do was stubbornly hold on and wait for an opportunity to break out of the encirclement. Time passed quietly, and a quarter of an hour passed quickly. The heaven-vanquishing sword formation maintained its balance. Half of its power was used to maintain the seal and defense, while the other half was used to kill Divine King Stellar Elephant. Even though God King Stellar Aspect's injuries were constantly worsening and the bronze armor he wore was becoming more and more tattered. However, he had been defending with all his might, trying his best to avoid being hit at his vital points and preserve his strength as much as possible. On the other hand, the Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong didn't suffer any attacks or threats. They were only attacking the heaven-destroying sword formation with all their might, and they were already panting from exhaustion. Their godly powers were being consumed rapidly. Their faces were getting paler and paler, and their powers were getting weaker and weaker. However, they could only grit their teeth and persevere, not daring to rest. After all, Divine King Stellar Aspect was watching from inside the sword formation. They didn't dare slack off. Otherwise, even if they won the battle and killed Ji Tianqing for revenge, they would offend Divine King Stellar Aspect. The two could only pray silently, hoping that the Divine Lords would arrive as soon as possible and lend them a hand. However, at that moment, the situation on the battlefield changed again. Ji Tianqing saw that so much time had passed, but there was still no progress. He couldn't kill Divine King Stellar Aspect in a short period of time. Therefore, he made a timely adjustment and changed his battle plan. Yang, Qingyu, and Lan, leave Divine Envoy Vast Sky to me. The three of you don't need to help me. Go outside the sword formation and finish off the Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong. Do your best to kill them. Originally, Yang, Chao Qingyu, and Lan had been attacking Divine King Stellar Aspect, but to no avail. Divine King Stellar Aspect was defending with all his might, so it was very difficult for their attacks to pose a fatal threat. After fighting for a long time, their divine powers were severely depleted. It was inevitable that their confidence would suffer a setback. Upon hearing Ji Tianqing's order, the three of them were energized. They revealed looks of joy and anticipation as they agreed without hesitation. All right. Yes, Your Majesty. Young Master, don't worry. Leave those two bastards to us. The three of them thought, we might not be able to deal with Divine Envoy Vast Sky, but can't we deal with two heavily injured Region Masters? Swoosh! 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 Divine light flashed as the three of them rapidly left the heaven-vanquishing sword formation and flew outside. The Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong were doing their best to use their divine arts, desperately attacking the heaven-vanquishing sword formation. Unexpectedly, Yang, Chao Qingyu, and Lan appeared. The two of them jumped in fright as their attacks faltered. At that moment, Chao Qingyu and Yang brandished their divine swords as they charged at the two region masters with murderous intent. With a roar, they launched their attacks. Bastards, hand over your lives. I've tolerated you for a long time. Die. Chao Qingyu brandished his green jade divine sword, sending out jade-green sword radiance that filled the sky like falling stars. Yang held a huge sword that was as wide as a bench in each hand as he charged ferociously at the two region masters, sending out 8 devastating sword radiances. Lan was not to be outdone. She dashed forward with a roar as she danced in the air, releasing divine light that filled the sky like thousands of blooming orchids. Suddenly, the Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong were swallowed by the divine arts. The two of them could not be bothered to attack the heaven-vanquishing sword formation. They could only desperately retreat to avoid the attacks of Yank and the other two. Although they managed to avoid most of the divine arts, they could not avoid a small number of attacks. Bam! 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 Boom! Boom! Following a series of muffled booms, the Golden Dragon Region ruler and Jing Feihong were sent flying. Yank, Chao Qingyu, and Lan were in high spirits as they charged even more ferociously, forcing the Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong to flee pathetically. They were unable to put up a fight. Following that, everyone began fighting and killing around the heaven-vanquishing sword formation. The heaven-vanquishing sword formation's operations were no longer affected as it suppressed and strangled Godly King's stellar aspect with all its might. Ji Tianqing also constantly used his ultimate divine powers, putting immense pressure on Godly King's stellar aspect. The pressure on Godly King's stellar aspect increased exponentially as the situation became even more perilous. Those two bastards are just too useless. This is bad. If I don't think of a way to break out, I'll be slowly eaten up and killed. Godly King's stellar aspect finally realized that the Golden Dragon Region Master and Jing Feihong were useless. They were destined to be of no help to him. If he wanted to escape the heaven-vanquishing sword formation, he could only rely on himself. He had already made up his mind. Even if he had to pay a huge price, he would use a forbidden technique to forcefully break out. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.